Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 827, Chapter 826, Victory. After being struck by 2 brick breaks and 2 aura spheres in succession, even though Zoroark's level was 19 levels higher than Blastoise's, the effect of type advantage meant it was instantly heavily injured. When Zoroark fell from the air, it crashed onto the ground covered in wounds, and the illusion it had been maintaining immediately collapsed and shattered. However, the gap between a level 36 Blastoise and a level 55 Zoroark was still enormous. Even after such a combined heavy assault, Blastoise still failed to knock Zoroark out in one blow. My goodness. Contestant Tyler's Blastoise has seriously injured contestant Hugh's Zoroark. This is unbelievable. The referee had just broken free from the illusion and had been preparing to announce Zoroark's victory again. But when he saw the situation on the battlefield, his eyes widened in disbelief before he shouted excitedly, "Wah!" At that moment, most of the audience also snapped out of the illusion. When they saw the scene on the battlefield and heard the referee's announcement, an uproar immediately erupted. How is that possible? Mr. Hugh's Zoroark was actually badly injured by that man's Blastoise. Sonoko had also just escaped the illusion. Hearing the referee's words, she stared at the battlefield as it gradually returned to normal, her face full of disbelief. So it's the power of aura. It seems aura power is the natural enemy of Zoroark's illusions. If that's the case, then my Togekiss should be able to do the same. Beside her, Alice hadn't seen what had happened because she was trapped in the illusion earlier. But she had heard Hugh's somewhat furious voice just now and vaguely guessed the answer. What an impressive guy. He even managed to capture a Blastoise that has mastered aura power. Ha ha ha, looks like that brat from the Adolf family might just capsize in a gutter this time. In the aisle, the manager Okumer burst into laughter as he looked at the battle situation. Upon hearing her manager's words, Alessa simply nodded slightly. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Sato, who had just opened his eyes again, her gaze flickering with unknown thoughts. Get up, Zoroark. Use Dark Pulse. Hugh's expression was extremely grim, but when he saw that Zoroark had not yet lost its fighting ability, his mood improved slightly. He immediately encouraged it, hoping to finish the battle quickly. Zoroark itself was filled with anger. The greater its pride, the stronger the fury it felt now. Without needing Hugh's to say much, it gritted its teeth and forced itself back onto its feet. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying dark-type energy erupted from Zoroark's body. At the same time, the nightmare crystal hanging from its neck glowed intensely red. A massive black shockwave burst from its mouth. As soon as the dark shockwave was released, it transformed into a huge black maw that lunged straight toward Blastoise, destroying every obstacle in its path. Its speed was astonishingly fast. With Blastoise's current mobility, it would be impossible to escape the attack range normally. What terrifying dark-type energy! Blastoise can't take that head-on. Use the high-speed water wheel to dodge. Seeing the terrifying power behind Zoroark's furious Dark Pulse, Sato immediately realized Blastoise couldn't withstand it, even Protect might fail. Through telepathy, he quickly issued an order. Facing the incoming attack, every nerve in Blastoise's body screamed for it to dodge. The moment it received Sato's command, it wasted no time. It instantly retracted its limbs and head into its shell and began spinning rapidly. In an instant, the shell started rotating at high speed. Then, with the twin cannons on its back firing powerful jets of pressurized water, the spinning shell shot sideways in a curved arc through the air, transforming into a massive, high-speed spinning water wheel. In the end, Blastoise successfully avoided the attack range of Zoroark's Dark Pulse. Moreover, thanks to aura power, even inside its shell Blastoise could clearly lock onto Zoroark's position. Soon, by skillfully adjusting its trajectory through bursts of high-pressure water from different outlets on its shell, the spinning water will charge towards Zoroark with unstoppable momentum. Incredible. Blastoise has successfully dodged Zoroark's powerful attack. The referee shouted excitedly into the microphone. The audience was equally stunned by Blastoise's unusual movement technique, and cheers quickly erupted in support of the underdog making a comeback. Hugh's face darkened even further when he saw Blastoise evade the attack in such an unbelievable way. Dodge it. Then freeze it with Ice Beam. He knew Zoroark couldn't afford to take another hit. If Blastoise's attack landed, it would definitely lose its ability to fight. Zoroark's fighting spirit was remarkable. Even though its body was screaming in pain, it still clenched its teeth and endured. As Blastoise approached, Zoroark forced its legs to move and slid several meters to the left, narrowly avoiding the incoming strike. Immediately afterward, a beam of icy blue light shot from its mouth and struck Blastoise. The moment the high-speed water will touch the ice beam, it instantly froze into a giant block of ice in midair. However, due to inertia, it continued spinning rapidly. Eventually, the frozen mass crashed heavily onto the ground, with Blastoise sealed inside. However, Blastoise was still a water-type Pokémon and had high resistance to ice-type energy. Even as the ice block landed, cracks immediately spread across its surface. It was obvious Blastoise would break free soon. Seeing this, Hughes naturally would not miss such a golden opportunity. He ordered Zoroark to launch a full attack. But Zoroark was already gravely injured. That earlier devastating Dark Pulse had been its full-powered strike fueled by rage, and partially empowered by the Nightmare Crystal. If it had been in perfect condition, it might have been able to unleash another attack of that level. But now, it could only barely produce a normal power Dark Pulse. Blastoise was a defensive Pokémon with incredibly thick armor and a rock-solid shell. Even though Zoroark's level was much higher, the ordinary Dark Pulse could not knock it out instantly. As the smoke from the explosion cleared, a slightly blackened turtle shell lay on the battlefield. Then Blastoise's nearly unharmed head and limbs slowly emerged from the shell's gaps. At the same moment, following Sato's telepathic command, Blastoise activated its cannons again. When he saw Blastoise fire 2 aura spheres one after another, he immediately realized the battle was over. Use Protect to block them. Still unwilling to give up, he struggled desperately and ordered the severely injured Zoroark to attempt one last defense. Unfortunately, miracles did not occur. Sato had calculated everything precisely. Blastoise's 2 aura spheres were fired 2 seconds apart. Zoroark's green energy barrier from Protect successfully blocked the first one. But the second aura sphere struck directly into its chest, blasting it away. This time, Zoroark could no longer endure. By the time it fell from the air, it had already lost consciousness. Chapter 828, Chapter 827, Someone treated him to dinner. Zoroark was currently the strongest Pokémon in Hughes' team. His other Pokémon were only in their 40s. Now that Zoroark had fallen, Hughes was instantly pushed to the brink of defeat by Sato. The last Pokémon Hughes released was a level 48 Honchkrow. However, this Honchkrow clearly lacked the ability to turn the tide. Sato directly sent out Pikachu, whose stamina was almost completely intact. Then, without any suspense, after Honchkrow used Protect to block Pikachu's Thunderbolt, it was knocked down the very next moment. Before it could even get close to Pikachu, it was struck down by a single Electro Ball. The battle was over. Sato ultimately won the Pokémon battle, successfully achieving 10 consecutive victories. Next time, I definitely won't underestimate you again. You'll be participating in next year's Hoenn League Regional Tournament, right? When that time comes, let's battle again. I'll go all out. In any case, I'm very glad to have met you, Mr. Tyler. Although Hughes had lost, being from a distinguished family, he still maintained excellent sportsmanship. He didn't say anything harsh. As soon as the match ended, he walked over to Sato, shook his hand, and issued a challenge with a serious expression. I look forward to that day coming soon. But by then, my Blastoise and I won't be at this level anymore. You'd better be careful. Sato accepted Hughes' challenge without hesitation and replied with a smile. After saying that, he released the handshake and turned around with Pikachu, entering the players' tunnel that led directly to the contestants' lounge. Hughes remained standing where he was, ignoring the gazes of the surrounding spectators. He watched until Sato completely disappeared into the tunnel before finally turning and leaving. Father was right, only by going out into the world do you realize how small you are. First Nord and Alice, and now Tyler. I have to work even harder. Otherwise, if I'm not careful, I'll be surpassed by them. Along the way, Hughes remained silent, these thoughts weighing heavily on his mind. Yet aside from the disappointment of defeat, his face showed even more anticipation. Miss, should we go over? In the audience stands, Sonoko turned toward Alice and asked when she saw Hughes looking deep in thought. No need. Mr. Hughes won't collapse just because of a single defeat. Didn't you see? He's smiling. Alice shook her head. She had been watching Hughes the entire time. From his expression, she knew the man she admired wasn't discouraged by the loss. Instead, it had ignited his competitive spirit. A Pikachu capable of explosive burst damage, a Tentacruel that becomes extremely oppressive once it entangles its opponent, a Blastoise that can use Aura, and a trainer who personally possesses psychic power. What a trainer with limitless potential. Next year's Hoenn League Regional Tournament will definitely be exciting. Alice turned her gaze toward the players' tunnel where Sato had disappeared, thinking thoughtfully. After achieving 10 consecutive victories, Sato didn't immediately leave the battle arena. After resting briefly, he continued battling with his Pokémon, who had all recovered to full condition. His winning streak continued to climb. However, after reaching 18 consecutive victories, he finally encountered a truly formidable opponent. This time, he lost. And he lost decisively. His opponent used a level 63 Metacam, which single-handedly defeated Stereo, Tentacruel, and Cloyster in succession. Sato's winning streak ended there. After the streak was broken, Sato didn't continue challenging. He collected his reward from the service counter and quietly left the battle arena. With 18 consecutive wins, and each battle involving 3 Pokémon per side, Sato had completed 54 Pokémon battles that night. Even though his stamina far exceeded that of ordinary people, by the time he left the arena his head was still spinning. However, the gains from the intense battles were substantial. Aside from the 5 million Poké reward for the 18-win streak, his Pokémon had also gained valuable combat experience fighting opponents of similar strength, and many of them had leveled up. The current levels of Tyler's Pokémon were Pikachu, LV, Kecleon, LV, Tentacruel, LV, Lantern, LV, Cloyster, LV, Blastoise, LV, Stereo, LV, Kadabra, LV, Misdreavus, LV, Duskull, LV. Dragging his tired body, Sato entered a rather upscale restaurant nearby. After such intense battles, he naturally planned to spend part of his prize money to reward his Pokémon. Without hesitation, he ordered the best dishes in the restaurant. Before long, all kinds of mouth-watering delicacies were served. Sato and his Pokémon began happily enjoying the feast. More than an hour later, Sato and his Pokémon left the private dining room fully satisfied. But when Sato went to the front desk to pay the bill, he was informed that someone else had already paid for it. Someone paid for me. What did that person look like? Also, did they leave any contact information? Sato was momentarily stunned, but quickly regained his composure and asked directly. Being treated to a meal sounded nice, but Sato knew it was rarely that simple. If he accepted the favor without paying, it meant he owed someone a personal debt. And if that person asked for repayment later, the favor might cost far more than just a meal. Still, usually when someone treats you, it isn't a bad thing. Most likely the person simply wanted to attract his attention and use the meal as an introduction to make his acquaintance. After all, tonight's meal had not been cheap. Especially in such a high-end restaurant in the center of Slateport City. And with Kadabra, who loved ordering the most expensive dishes, as a notorious foodie at the table, the bill had reached 500,000 Poké after rounding. Therefore, no matter what, Sato had to meet the person who paid. If he found them agreeable, he might be willing to befriend them. If not, he wouldn't take advantage of that 500,000 Poké meal. Sure enough, when Sato asked for contact information, the receptionist immediately handed him a gold-trimmed business card. The moment Sato looked at the name on the card, surprise appeared on his face. Her? Why is she looking for me again? The name printed on the card was Sasaki Alice. Chapter 829, Chapter 828, Trouble After the Spotlight. After learning that the person inviting him to dinner was Alice, Sato thought about it for a moment. In the end, he still slipped the business card into his pocket. However, he did not immediately contact her using the information on the card. Instead, he turned and left the restaurant. By now, it was already past 11 p.m. The night was very deep. Sato knew it would be unwise to disturb the young lady of the Sasaki family at this hour. Besides, he believed that once she knew he had accepted the card, she would take the initiative to contact him. After Sato left, the waitress at the service counter quickly took out a brand new business card from a drawer and used her communicator to send a message to the contact information written on it. Meanwhile, in a luxurious villa located in the wealthy district of downtown Slateport City, Alice was undergoing her nightly skincare routine with the help of her maid, Sonoko. Suddenly, a silver communicator placed on the living room table chimed as a message arrived. Galade, who was lying on the living room sofa watching a Pokémon comedy movie, instantly used teleport to appear beside the table. He picked up the communicator, and then used teleport again to appear beside Alice in her bedroom. Thank you, Galade. Alice took the communicator from him and immediately saw that there was an unread message on the screen. She thanked him with a smile. Galade was eager to get back to his movie. He nodded at Alice before using teleport again to return to the sofa in the living room. It seems that Mr. Tyler is willing to get acquainted with us. Sonoko, later go reserve a seafood banquet at the Slateport Grand Hotel and send Mr. Tyler an invitation. Tomorrow, I want to meet him personally. After reading the message, a satisfied smile appeared on Alice's delicate face. She turned to Sonoko, who was currently arranging her hair, and gave the order. I understand, Mississippi. I'll handle it right away. Sonoko dared not disobey Alice and nodded immediately. After leaving the restaurant, Sato planned to return to his lodging at the Pokémon Center. However, halfway there, he realized that someone was following him, and there was more than one person. It had to be said that while Sato had stolen the spotlight in the battle arena, he had also drawn the attention of certain ill-intentioned individuals. What these people were targeting was not his life, but the Pokémon under his command. Whether it was Pikachu, Kadabra, or Blastoise, these three Pokémon had demonstrated impressive combat strength and astonishing potential during the battles. In particular, the extremely rare Kadabra and the Blastoise capable of using Aura made many trainers green with envy. Among them, some jealous individuals had already begun setting their sights on those Pokémon. Especially after they learned that Sato was merely a civilian trainer with no backing, they became even more brazen, spending large sums of money to hire shady characters to steal his Pokémon. Money moves people's hearts. Although Sato had displayed considerable strength, the buyers were offering high prices. Some people could not resist the temptation and chose to take the risk, some even joining forces. Of course, Sato was currently in the city center, where security was the tightest. These people naturally did not dare to make a move there. So instead, they quietly followed him, watching his every move. The moment Sato left the city and entered a sparsely populated area, they would strike without hesitation. So they've finally come. This is the tragedy of being weak, I suppose. If you show off too many good things, people will inevitably covet them. After noticing the sneaky figures trailing behind him, Sato wasn't particularly surprised, just somewhat helpless. In fact, this was precisely why Sato had initially been reluctant to enter the battle arena too early. The arena was a mixed bag of people. Once your Pokémon were exposed, certain troubles would inevitably come knocking. For example, recruitment attempts from powerful families like Alice's, or the wolves now watching him greedily from behind. For a civilian trainer with no background to grow into a powerful, independent trainer, the road was extraordinarily difficult. The higher you climbed, the more restraints you would face. After all, no major power like the existence of a strong individual who refused to follow their rules. It's about time this identity finds some faction to rely on. Otherwise, without a tiger's skin to borrow for intimidation, once my Pokémon continue to attract attention, before this identity reaches Elite 4 level, these money-chasing wolves behind me will never stop appearing. With my current strength, as long as Elite 4 level trainers don't make a move, I'm not afraid of anyone. But the more I fight, the more things I reveal, and that's not good for keeping my identity hidden. Still, there's no rush. Tonight I flexed my muscles quite a bit in the battle arena. Many factions will probably throw olive branches at me soon. I can just sit back and fish for benefits. Thinking deeper about it, Sato realized this might actually be a good opportunity, an opportunity for the identity of Tyler to officially enter the sights of major factions. Although being followed by so many people was irritating, Sato wasn't foolish enough to deal with them inside the city. Eventually, he entered a nearby clothing store and used teleport to shake off the tails. However, Sato had somewhat underestimated their tracking ability. Not long after, he discovered the same people following him again. Clearly, these lackeys were local snakes of Slateport City with numerous informants under their command. It was difficult for Sato to shake them completely. They really won't give up. Looks like if I don't teach them a lesson, they'll never learn. Otherwise, they'll really think I'm someone easy to bully. After returning to his room at the Pokémon Center, Sato noticed that the tails were still lingering in the hallway, pretending to be ordinary passers-by. Instead of getting angry, he laughed coldly. Soon, Sato turned off the lights in his room and pretended to go to sleep. The moment the light by his window went out, the people loitering in the corridor immediately lit up with excitement. Malicious glints appeared in their eyes. Chapter 830, Chapter 829, A Warning Strike. What are you sneaking around here for? Leave immediately. Half an hour later, just as the tailing thugs were preparing to wait until Sato fell asleep before sending out ghost-type Pokémon to attack him, a guard on duty walked out from the stairwell with a Growlive. With a cold expression, he ordered them to leave. Every floor of the Pokémon Center had surveillance cameras. These people had been wandering around the corridor for a long time, and their suspicious behavior had already attracted the attention of the monitoring staff. Although they appeared intermittently and deliberately avoided the visible cameras in the hallway, they had no idea that there were also hidden cameras that the naked eye could not detect. The cameras that were clearly visible in the corridor were merely decoys meant to mislead people. Because of this, the monitoring room quickly identified them as suspicious individuals and sent security personnel to intervene before they could commit any crime. The Pokémon Center was the territory of the Joy family. Even though these lackeys belonged to a relatively powerful local gang in Slateport City, once they were discovered, they didn't dare provoke the Joy family. If they were placed on the Joy family's blacklist, they would have nowhere left to go. Thus, under the guard's unfriendly gaze, the thugs left the Pokémon Center with awkward expressions, not daring to utter a single threatening word. However, after leaving the Pokémon Center, they continued monitoring all of its exits in case Sato attempted to sneak away. Keep a close watch. This is a deal worth tens of millions of Poke dollars. Even if we split it among ourselves, it'll still be a massive windfall. Late at night, on the rooftop of a building opposite the Pokémon Center, one of the watchers, his eyelids drooping with sleep, said this to another man who had just brought some late-night food. As soon as he finished speaking, he snatched the steaming, fragrant meal from the newcomer and hurried to a wind-sheltered corner, devouring it hungrily. Of course. Brother, you go get some rest. I'll handle the second half of the night. The newcomer grinned and patted his chest confidently. Then he picked up the infrared binoculars from the ground and continued the surveillance. But the moment he looked through the binoculars, he saw nothing but darkness covering the view. Assuming something dirty had gotten onto the lens, he quickly lowered the binoculars to check them. However, as soon as he lowered them, he realized that he himself was standing in a shadow. In front of him appeared a pair of well-worn running shoes. Following the shoes upward with his gaze, he saw a mysterious masked man staring at him coldly. A deadly sense of danger instantly flashed through his mind. But before he could react, the foot wearing those running shoes suddenly kicked forward. Caught completely off guard, the thug was struck squarely in the face and sent flying backward. By the time he hit the ground, he had already lost consciousness, several blood-stained teeth scattered beside him. Who are you? Show yourself. My Tiana, tear him apart. Nearby, the other thug, who had been happily eating his midnight snack in the wind shelter, reacted quickly. Throwing away the food in his hand, he hurled a pokeball toward the masked man and shouted. In the next instant, a fierce Tiana burst out of the pokeball and lunged at the masked stranger. But the attack hit nothing but air. The masked man, accompanied by a Pikachu, had vanished. When he appeared again, he was already standing behind Tiana's trainer. At the same time, Pikachu released a burst of electricity. The thug let out a short scream before collapsing, instantly knocked unconscious. Just as Tiana tried to turn around to help its trainer, the masked man and Pikachu vanished again. In less than 10 seconds, the two watchers monitoring Sato were both knocked unconscious. If the masked men had not held back, they would already be corpses. Over the next half hour, several other watchers lurking around the Pokémon Center suffered the same fate. Each of them was suddenly attacked by the masked men and swiftly defeated with overwhelming force. Inside Sato's room at the Pokémon Center, the masked man carrying Pikachu suddenly appeared. Removing the black cloth covering his face revealed that the mysterious attacker was none other than Sato himself. That should make the forces behind those lackeys behave themselves for a while. If there's a next time, I won't hold back. After putting away his night outfit, Sato lay back on the bed, yawning slightly from fatigue. His purpose in teaching those thugs a lesson was to send a message to the forces behind them. He was not someone easy to provoke. As for sparing their lives, it was because he didn't want to completely tear relations apart with those factions. Perhaps because he was too tired, Sato quickly fell asleep. Meanwhile, the night sky gradually gave way to dawn. Sure enough, the next day Sato discovered that his warning had worked. Most of the watchers had disappeared completely, and some of the factions behind them even sent compensation as a gesture of goodwill. However, there were still some whose eyes were blinded by greed. They ignored Sato's warning and continued sending people to follow him. So they really refused to accept kindness. Since you insist on courting death, don't blame me for being ruthless. Although Sato wasn't entirely satisfied with the outcome, it was acceptable. At the same time, he quietly developed a killing intent toward the stubborn watchers and the forces behind them. But before he could deal with them completely, Sato still had to respond to the invitations delivered to him early that morning. Most of the invitations came from local forces within Slateport City. Of course, these local powers were relatively legitimate armed organizations, usually controlled by local conglomerates. Among them, only one truly caught Sato's interest, the Slateport Shipping Security Company, controlled by Slateport's local shipping tycoon, Brock. The so-called security company was essentially a private armed force created by Brock. Most of its members were civilian trainers like Sato. Brock recruited them as mercenaries. In ordinary times they operated as a normal business, but whenever special situations arose, they could instantly become a powerful armed force under Brock's command. In fact, many large corporations maintained similar organizations disguised as security companies. Even powerful families like the Sasaki family were no exception. The invitation Sato received from Alice that morning was signed with the name Sasaki Security Company. Chapter 831, Chapter 830, Shopping Around. Sato didn't have much time to entertain everyone. From the stack of invitations, he ultimately chose only 3, the Slateport Shipping Security Company, the Slateport Pokemon Enthusiasts Club, and the Sasaki Security Company. Conveniently, their meeting times did not overlap. He first went to meet with the representatives from the Slateport Shipping Security Company. However, he was disappointed. The person they sent was merely an ordinary department manager, and the terms offered were extremely harsh. The most unacceptable condition was the restriction on his personal freedom. Once he signed the contract, he would be required to remain in Slateport City at all times until it expired, unless under special circumstances, and be on call whenever needed. Faced with such insincere and demanding terms, Sato naturally refused. However, he didn't lose his temper on the spot. Instead, he politely declined under the pretext of needing a few more days to consider. As for the meeting with the Slateport Pokemon Enthusiasts Club, Sato was fairly satisfied. Although their representative was not the main chairman, Sasaki, they still sent a branch president, which showed sufficient respect. The terms were also relatively relaxed. They did not attempt to restrict his personal freedom. The only condition was that whenever the club needed him, he must provide support unconditionally. However, such lenient terms came with weaker compensation. The club only promised an annual, potential investment of 5 million poke dollars. Of course, if Sato achieved high placements in events such as league tournaments, Battle Frontier challenges, or competitions held by other major organizations, the investment could increase accordingly. Just like buying goods requires comparing options, Sato was essentially selling himself this time. Naturally, he was being extremely cautious. He did not immediately agree to the club's offer, deciding instead to wait for the final, and most important, meeting. The Sasaki family really does have deep pockets. Even the place they chose to host this dinner is far superior to the other two. Looks like I'm in for a treat tonight. At 7 p.m., Sato arrived on time at the Slateport International Hotel. Looking at its resplendent, golden exterior, he couldn't help but marvel at the Sasaki family's wealth. He knew this hotel well, it was the most luxurious in Slateport City, and the cuisine inside was among the finest available. The people who came here were either wealthy or powerful. Without connections, it was nearly impossible to dine here, as private rooms were usually booked days in advance. What pleased Sato was that the staff here did not judge people by appearance. Despite his plain clothing, the doorman still politely asked whether he had a reservation. After presenting his invitation, a beautiful waitress led him inside and brought him to the private room Alice had reserved. Inside, aside from Sato, only Alice and Sonoko were present. As for Pokemon, there was a single Galade, standing upright at Alice's right side like a meticulous bodyguard, proud and powerful. "Welcome, Mr. Tyler. Please, have a seat." The moment Sato entered, Alice stood up and greeted him with a bright smile. Tonight, she was clearly dressed with great care. Wearing an elegant moon-white gown, her hair styled neatly, combined with her delicate features, graceful figure, and innate noble aura, she resembled a blooming white peony, luxurious and dignified. Even with Sato's strong composure, he couldn't help but feel momentarily stunned by her beauty. In contrast, Sato, dressed as usual, appeared somewhat plain. However, his mental fortitude was strong, he felt neither awkward nor inferior, and calmly took a seat opposite Alice. Humph, what a country bumpkin. No manners at all. At that moment, Sonoko, dressed in a sharp women's suit, looked at Sato through her sunglasses with undisguised disdain as he sat directly across from Alice. Still, despite her dissatisfaction, she didn't dare disobey Alice. After Sato sat down, she quickly stepped forward and arranged an exquisite set of tableware for him. Because of Galad's presence, Sato refrained from using his psychic detection to secretly observe Alice and Sonoko. However, his perception was far beyond ordinary people. Even though Sonoko said nothing, he could clearly sense her hostility toward him, which left him somewhat puzzled. Still, she was merely Alice's attendant. Since he could feel Alice's goodwill, he quickly ignored Sonoko's attitude. "If I'm not mistaken, this beautiful lady must be Miss Alice. I watched your performance at the Slateport Grand Contest, you raised your Charizard exceptionally well. You must be a very powerful trainer." Sato wasn't inexperienced. Instead of jumping straight to business, he offered sincere praise. Women naturally enjoy compliments, and Alice was no exception. Especially since Sato's words touched on what she was most proud of, her performance and her Pokemon, her smile grew even brighter. "You flatter me, Mr. Tyler. You're the truly remarkable one. Winning 18 consecutive battles at the Slateport Battle Arena last night, your performance amazed everyone. If your 19th opponent hadn't taken advantage of you, your winning streak would surely have continued." Alice knew Sato was flattering her, so she returned the courtesy, praising his performance at the arena. After this exchange of mutual compliments, the atmosphere quickly became pleasant. Neither rushed to discuss cooperation, instead chatting about various topics. Alice, born into a noble family, had traveled the world since childhood. Her knowledge and experience far surpassed ordinary people, and with her elite education, she seemed to have endless topics to talk about. Sato, however, was playing the role of Tyler. Naturally, he couldn't reveal his true experiences, so he mostly listened. But whenever the topic turned to Pokemon, he demonstrated the solid knowledge expected of a top student from Goldenrod Academy, further convincing Alice that Mr. Tyler possessed tremendous investment potential. As they chatted, dishes were gradually served. Before long, the two seemed like old friends, even releasing their Pokemon to share the seafood feast together. At last, as the pleasant dinner neared its end, Alice finally brought up the true purpose of the evening. "Has Mr. Tyler considered his future? As your Pokemon grow stronger and your team expands, the resources you require will only increase. It's extremely difficult to sustain that alone. I know you've already joined the league, but while the league is vast, it supports countless people, and its internal factions are complex. Advancing on your own is extremely difficult. My Sasaki family may not compare to the League, but we still have some influence in the Kanto region. If you don't mind, we are willing to provide the resources you'll need to raise your Pokemon in the future. Chapter 832, Chapter 831, Selling for a Good Price. Here it comes, the main event is finally about to begin. When Sato heard Alice suddenly bring up that topic, he immediately realized that tonight's real negotiation had begun. His gaze sharpened slightly, then he lowered his eyelids, pretending to be deep in thought. Although I was born in the Johto region, I've long heard of the great name of the Sasaki family during my studies. However, I still wish to continue traveling and broaden my horizons. If I accept Miss Alice's invitation, I'm afraid I won't be able to remain so free. After more than 10 seconds, Sato looked at Alice and slowly voiced his concerns. Freedom was extremely important to him. He still had many things to accomplish, and staying in one place for too long would only limit his growth. Therefore, unless there was sufficient freedom, he would generally not consider such offers. You don't need to worry about that, Mr. Tyler. The Sasaki family will not force you to stay. This is simply an investment in your potential. We only hope that when you achieve great success in the future, you won't forget the Sasaki family. A yearly sum of 20 million Poke Dollars, and if your strength improves further or you win important competitions, the level of investment will increase accordingly. What do you think, Mr. Tyler? Are you satisfied? Hearing Sato's hesitation, Alice's gemstone-like eyes lit up. She smiled gently as she explained. That doesn't seem appropriate. How can I take money without doing anything? If that's the case, I'm afraid I can't accept it. Instead of feeling pleased, Sato's heart tightened slightly. He showed a troubled expression as he responded. He understood perfectly well, money from the Sasaki family was not so easy to take. If they were willing to invest without immediate returns, it meant they valued him highly and expected even greater benefits from him in the future. But why did they value him so much? Sato was deeply curious about this. If it were merely because of his 18 consecutive wins in the battle arena, he didn't believe that alone was enough to earn such generous terms. In negotiations, the best way to gain an advantage is to understand the other party's cards. Sato suspected that Alice had noticed something during his battles. That was likely the reason behind her favorable treatment. Of course, he also knew that if Alice truly understood his full value, the current offer was probably just the lowest starting point. After all, the goal of negotiation is always to achieve the greatest gain with the least cost. Thus, Sato chose to advance by retreating, hoping to extract even greater benefits from the Sasaki family. He knew very well what the Sasaki family represented, a colossal force in the Kanto region, with immeasurable wealth. Even a tiny fraction of their resources could make someone rich overnight. Moreover, both the Kanto League and Team Rocket had to show them respect. If he truly intended to join the Sasaki family, then not taking advantage of this moment to secure more benefits would simply be foolish. Sato was extremely confident in his own potential. Leaving aside the fact that his true strength was already close to Elite 4 level, his identity as a psychic alone was enough to command a far higher price than what Alice had just offered. Mr. Tyler truly has integrity. In that case, if the Sasaki family ever needs your help, you may choose whether or not to assist. Alice frowned slightly upon hearing his response, but quickly relaxed, pretending not to notice that Sato was bargaining. With such a generous investment from you, how could I not help? If you ever need me, I'll definitely be there. Sato wasn't in a hurry. He nodded firmly, speaking with conviction. At the same time, as soon as he finished speaking, a faint blue light flashed in his eyes. A powerful wave of psychic energy rippled outward from his body. Then, with a slight lift of his hand, a bright red crab from the table floated into his grasp. Oh my god, this country bumpkin really is a psychic. Sonoko, who had been unable to join the conversation, widened her eyes in shock at Sato's display of telekinesis. Alice had long suspected that Sato was a psychic, but she had never seen proof. That was why she hadn't increased her offer earlier. Now, seeing him use psychic power firsthand, and hearing from Galade that Sato had already reached the beginner level of psychic ability, she was equally astonished. Alice had thoroughly investigated the identity Sato was using as Tyler. Based on her findings, she believed his psychic awakening occurred after he miraculously recovered from a vegetative state. It had to be said, Sakiki's methods were flawless. The traces had been cleaned so thoroughly that no one suspected anything about Tyler's identity. If that were true, then in less than 2 months after awakening, Tyler had already advanced to the beginner psychic level. What did that mean? It meant his psychic talent was extraordinary, he had a high chance of reaching advanced psychic levels in the future. No wonder a rare psychic-type Pokemon like Kadabra, which has extremely strict requirements for its trainer, chose him. It seems, the offer must be increased. Alice's thoughts raced. The more she considered it, the more she valued Sato. If a psychic with such talent could become an ally of the Sasaki family, their prosperity would only grow stronger. Mr. Tyler, let's not beat around the bush anymore. Your abilities are exactly what the Sasaki family needs. I sincerely hope you will join us. State your terms. As long as they're reasonable, I can make the decision myself. With that, Alice took a deep breath and laid everything out directly. She was confident, given the wealth of the Sasaki family, winning over a newly risen psychic was absolutely within reach. Since Miss Alice has the authority to decide, then I won't hold back. Seeing Alice's decisiveness, Sato knew it was time to make his move. His gaze sharpened as he slowly began stating his conditions. Chapter 833, Chapter 832, A Generous Investment. At around 7 a.m. the next morning, Sato had already packed his belongings and left the Pokemon Center. Riding his off-road bicycle, he set off toward Mauville City. The Sasaki family really is impressive. All those tails disappeared early this morning. With their protection, traveling will be much more convenient. On the high-speed cycling route, Sato used his psychic power to scan his surroundings. After confirming that no one was following him, he couldn't help but regard the Sasaki family even more highly. Since last night, Sato had already accepted Alice's invitation and become an external elder of the Sasaki family. Although this matter had not yet been publicly announced, the Sasaki family clearly valued him greatly. The troublesome stalkers who had been following him were swiftly dealt with through subtle means. By revealing his identity as a psychic, Sato had engaged in a relaxed and pleasant negotiation with Alice the previous night, ultimately securing an extremely generous investment package consisting of 5 key points. First, the Sasaki family would allocate 200 million Poke annually as funding. Second, they would provide him with a detailed book on cultivating psychic-type Pokemon. Third, they would grant him an advanced meditation technique along with a book on psychic power application. Fourth, they would supply a certain quantity of rare food material specifically for nurturing psychic-type Pokemon. Fifth, they would provide him with a Ralts Pokemon egg. To be honest, even Sato himself felt that he had been asking for too much when he proposed these terms. Leaving aside the annual 200 million Poke dollars, the remaining 4 conditions were all exceedingly demanding. Books on psychic Pokemon cultivation, advanced meditation techniques, psychic application manuals, rare food resources, and a Ralts egg, every single one of these items was priceless and nearly impossible to obtain on the market. Among them, the psychic Pokemon cultivation book was a treasure among treasures. For trainers specializing in psychic types, its value far exceeded even that of pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Yet to Sato's surprise, Alice had agreed to almost everything without hesitation. Except for the Ralts egg, the other 4 items would be delivered to him as soon as possible. The 200 million Poke dollars had even been transferred to him on the spot, instantly swelling his previously empty wallet. From this alone, one could see just how deep the Sasaki family's resources ran. Their vault must be filled with countless treasures. Of course, receiving such benefits meant Sato had to pay a corresponding price. From now on, he would represent the Sasaki family. Under normal circumstances, he could act freely, but whenever the family required his assistance, he must respond, and stand unconditionally on their side. At the same time, since Alice was the one who had brought him into the family, Sato would have to support her within the Sasaki family in the future. Trading future potential for immediate investment, who gained and who lost in this deal was impossible to determine at present. But for now, Sato believed he had profited. After all, the future was uncertain. That psychic cultivation book alone makes this deal worthwhile. Not many people would part with something so priceless. And on top of that, there's the advanced meditation technique and a Ralts egg. I really sold myself for a high price this time. Alice is incredibly generous, I'll have to see her in a new light. Even now, recalling last night's agreement, Sato still felt it was somewhat unreal. Once again, he was deeply impressed by the strength of a great family like the Sasakis. Meanwhile, as Sato rode toward Mauville City, at the private terminal of Slateport City's international airport, Alice, dressed in fashionable elegance, was boarding a small private aircraft with her maid, Sonoko. Miss, your decision to make such a private investment has displeased the master somewhat. Although this trainer named Tyler is a psychic, the conditions you offered are far too generous. It may not be favorable for the family's future control over him. After Alice took her seat, an elderly man dressed like a butler approached with a bottle of fine, decanted red wine. As he poured it into her glass, he spoke with a slightly troubled expression. Don't worry, Grandpa Pino. I'll personally explain things to Father. I don't think this deal is a loss. Those items are just sitting in the treasury gathering dust anyway. It's better to use them to recruit a trainer who has the potential to become a psychic elite. I've already investigated Tyler thoroughly. He's currently an orphan, and the League doesn't even know he has awakened psychic powers yet. Once they find out, we may not even get a chance. At that point, what we offer would only be icing on the cake. More importantly, he's completely alone. His only relative is an uncle who abandoned him when he was in a vegetative state. Even though he now has Pokemon companions, he must still feel lonely deep down. If the Sasaki family can give him the warmth of a home, then in the future, we'll gain a powerful guardian. Oh, right, has the family found a suitable candidate yet? And have the things I requested been prepared? Alice gently swirled the wine in her glass, took a small sip, and spoke calmly. Because everything happened so suddenly, a candidate hasn't been finalized yet. As for the items you requested, the master has approved them all. However, the Ralt's egg is extremely rare, so it hasn't been secured yet. Hearing Alice's mature reasoning, the elderly butler smiled with clear relief. I see. Then send the other items to Mr. Tyler first. As for the Ralt's egg, acquire it as soon as possible. Spend more money if necessary, but its quality must be guaranteed. The Sasaki family cannot afford to lose face. Alice nodded. After finishing her wine in one go, she turned her gaze toward the window, watching Slateport City grow smaller and smaller in the distance. Chapter 834, Chapter 833, Zapdos, the self-proclaimed ruler of the mountain. At noon, Sato once again passed through the cycling road and entered Mauville City. This time, his purpose for coming was simple, to challenge Watson for the Dynamo badge, and at the same time fulfill his previous agreement with Watson and the others to attend the unfinished celebration banquet. However, seeing that it was already lunchtime, Sato wasn't in a hurry to challenge Watson. Instead, he decided to stop by and visit Horn, the ice cream shop owner he had met during the previous power outage in Mauville, and his daughter. Sato remembered that next to Horn's ice cream shop was a well-reviewed restaurant. He could conveniently eat there first before heading to the Mauville gym. Soon, following his memory, Sato arrived at the ice cream shop. It was midday, the hottest time of the day, and business was thriving. Many couples were inside, chatting and enjoying cold desserts. Welcome, Dad, it's Big Brother Tyler. As soon as Sato pushed open the door, a green-haired girl in a cute maid outfit immediately recognized him. She quickly turned and called out to Horn, who was busy at the counter. Come here, Pikachu. After speaking, Horn's daughter, Linda, ran over excitedly and stretched out her arms toward Pikachu. Pika-Pi. Naturally delighted, Pikachu leapt happily into Linda's arms and let her cuddle him to her heart's content. Ah, Tyler. It's been a while. What would you like to eat? It's on the house. Hearing Linda's voice, Horn quickly put down his work and turned toward Sato, greeting him warmly. He was deeply grateful to Sato. From Watson, he had learned that Sato had played a major role in resolving the power outage incident. As a citizen of Mauville who had suffered from the blackout, Horn felt he owed Sato a great deal. Thanks, but I'll pass. I just came by to see how you two have been doing. Looks like things are going well. I haven't had lunch yet, so I'll eat at the restaurant next door and then head to the Mauville gym to challenge Watson. Sato waved his hand, politely declining the offer. Business picked up naturally once the power came back. But, you picked a bad time to visit. Watson isn't at the gym these days. If you want to challenge him, you'll have to wait a few days. Hearing that Sato planned to challenge Watson, Horn revealed a slightly amused expression and explained. Oh. Something happened again. Seems gym leaders are always busy. Sato wasn't particularly bothered by the news, but since Watson was his friend, he became curious and asked about the reason. He knew very well that although gym leaders appeared enviable, with high status, authority, and abundant resources, they paid a heavy price for it. If one thought their job was simply to act as sparring partners for challengers, that would be completely wrong. Gym leaders were among the league's strongest forces stationed in cities and were responsible for maintaining public order. Whenever something serious happened, they were the first to respond, always standing on the front lines of danger. Moreover, if anything went wrong in the city, they would be the first to be held accountable by the league. Inspectors could easily strip them of their position. Mauville City, being a central transportation hub in Hoenn, was one of the most developed cities in the region. Naturally, incidents occurred frequently, and gym leaders like Watson were constantly occupied. It's not a huge deal. You know the abandoned power plant in the southeast of Mauville, right? It's become a gathering place for wild electric-type Pokémon. Recently, something happened there, and it attracted a wild Zapdos, which has now taken over the place. You're a trainer, you know what Zapdos is. Which trainer wouldn't want a legendary Pokémon like that? Because of this, a lot of trainers from Mauville and nearby areas have rushed there. But catching Zapdos isn't that easy. It's said that the Zapdos has already subdued the wild Pokémon in the power plant and made itself the ruler. Many trainers didn't even get to see it before being beaten back by its fierce subordinates. I heard quite a few people have died. Watson's luck is terrible. Because of the casualties, the league has taken this matter seriously. So he's been sent there as labor, supposedly to maintain order and stop reckless trainers from causing more deaths. Horn and Watson were close friends and often chatted through their communicators, so he knew the situation well. Hearing Sato ask, he explained everything in detail. I see, looks like challenging Watson in the next few days won't be possible. Sato nodded in understanding. On the surface, he appeared calm, but inside, he was deeply shocked by the news about Zapdos. He knew a fair amount about this legendary Pokémon. Zapdos were not extremely rare and typically roamed the world, chasing thunderstorms. Some believed that thunderstorms were caused by Zapdos, but that wasn't quite true. Like most electric-type Pokémon, Zapdos fed on electricity, but it had extremely refined tastes. It only consumed naturally formed lightning. That was why Zapdos often appeared in violent thunderstorms. Now, however, a wild Zapdos had abandoned the chase for storms and settled in an abandoned power plant. That could only mean one thing. There was likely an extremely valuable electric-type treasure inside. Sato speculated that Watson's mission wasn't just about maintaining order, he was probably also there for whatever treasure had appeared. Interesting. Whether there's really some electric-type treasure or not, it's worth checking out. And if there is, I'll definitely have to compete for it. Soon after, Sato bid farewell to Horn and Linda and went to the restaurant next door for lunch. But by then, his thoughts had already drifted toward the abandoned power plant in the southeast of Mauville City. Chapter 835, Chapter 834, Innocent Bystanders Get Dragged In. After finishing lunch and taking a short rest, Sato quickly mounted his off-road bicycle and headed toward Route 110, south of Mauville City. The abandoned power plant was located on the eastern side of that route. Clearly, the allure of Zapdos was immense. Even though grim news had already spread from that area, trainers' enthusiasm remained extremely high. Along the way, Sato encountered many trainers traveling in groups. However, he could tell that most of them were simply there out of curiosity, to catch a glimpse of a legendary Pokémon. Very few truly intended to capture Zapdos. When Sato arrived at the entrance to the abandoned power plant, he discovered that the area had already been placed under strict lockdown. A large number of League trainers in uniform had surrounded the entrance and were preventing others from entering. As a result, the entrance had become extremely congested. Many unwilling trainers began causing a commotion, refusing to leave. Looks like getting in the normal way won't work. Sato frowned as he looked at the crowded scene just over a dozen meters ahead, feeling somewhat troubled. Hey, kid, you want to get in and make a fortune too? I've got a way. Interested? Just as Sato was about to use his psychic detection to locate Watson and try entering through connections, a shifty-looking middle-aged trainer quietly approached him and spoke in a low voice with a smile. A fortune? I've only heard there's a wild Zapdos here. Is there some kind of treasure inside too? Sato wasn't some naive newcomer. The moment he heard this, he already guessed that this guy was most likely a scammer. Still, he didn't expose him. Instead, he pretended to be curious and inexperienced. After all, even scammers often mix truth with lies. If everything they said was fake, anyone with a brain would see through it. The best liars always blended real information into their deception. You don't know, huh? Zapdos is a legendary Pokémon. The place it appears, how could it be ordinary? Word's already spreading that some incredible treasure has appeared inside this abandoned power plant. That's what attracted Zapdos here. So, interested in going in to get rich? Catching Zapdos is too hard, and there's only one anyway. But I heard there's plenty of that treasure inside. As long as you're lucky, you'll definitely get something. Sell it, and boom, rich overnight. Seeing Sato take the bait, the middle-aged man grew delighted and eagerly embellished his story. I see. Thanks for telling me something so important, big brother. But the entrance is blocked by League enforcement. Do you have a way in? Though Sato inwardly found the explanation mostly meaningless, he continued playing along. There are too many people here. Come with me, we'll talk over there. This method can't be widely known, or it won't work. The middle-aged man's smile widened. He looked around cautiously, acting mysterious, then grabbed Sato's hand and began pulling him toward a quieter spot. At the same time, he casually gestured toward the crowd. Sato didn't resist. He was curious to see what trick this man was about to pull. Stop right there. You scammer. Give me back my money. Before they could go far, a red-haired girl suddenly rushed out of the crowd, furious. One hand on her hip, she pointed at the middle-aged man and shouted. As soon as she spoke, two young men about Sato's age stepped forward behind her, glaring fiercely at the now pale-faced scammer. Sato immediately understood, this girl was clearly one of the scammer's previous victims, now here to demand justice. The middle-aged man also recognized her. At first, he didn't care, but the moment he saw the two young men, he decisively abandoned Sato and bolted. Clearly experienced in such situations, his speed and explosiveness were impressive. In the blink of an eye, he had already run over 10 meters away. Don't let him escape. Go, Plusle, catch him. You think you can bully my sister and run? No way. Diglett, use agility and cut him off. Weepinbell, use Vine Whip to grab him. The red-haired girl and the two young men immediately gave chase, sending out their Pokémon while running. The surrounding crowd quickly understood what was happening, but no one stepped in. Everyone kept their distance, unwilling to get involved. Hey, getting scammed by me is your honor. Think of it as a lesson, so you won't get tricked again. Come out, Weezing, you smokescreen. Seeing no one interfering, the middle-aged man relaxed and sneered. He threw out a pokeball while running. A well-developed Weezing appeared above him, releasing a large cloud of choking black smoke that instantly engulfed the pursuers. Caught off guard, the red-haired girl, the two young men, and their Pokémon inhaled the smoke and immediately stopped, coughing violently. Soon, the smoke was dispersed by flying-type Pokémon summoned by nearby trainers who were also affected. But by then, the scammer had already vanished without a trace. What a shame. Left behind, Sato shrugged, feeling slightly bored. However, just as he was about to continue searching for Watson to gain entry into the power plant. Stop right there. You're definitely that guy's accomplice, aren't you? He ran away, so you'll pay me back instead. The red-haired girl, having lost her target, stormed toward Sato in anger. Without listening to any explanation, she pointed at him and accused him outright. Clearly hot-tempered and furious, she didn't even wait for Sato to respond. She immediately ordered her Plusle to attack him. The two young men behind her, worried she might be at a disadvantage, also commanded their Pokémon to attack Sato. Chapter 836, Chapter 835, The Special Unit. What the heck is going on here? Sato felt speechless when these three people suddenly came up to demand money from him and launched an attack without even giving him time to explain. However, he quickly sensed that something about this situation was off. The timing of these three appearing was just too coincidental. Seeing them begin tightening their encirclement and surrounding him, Sato naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. But this time, he didn't choose to send out his Pokémon to counterattack. There were too many people around, and these three also didn't dare to have their Pokémon use dangerous moves. They only used them to block his path. That was precisely why Sato refrained from deploying his own Pokémon. Thus, under Sato's telepathic command, the Pikachu on his shoulder suddenly had its tail glow brightly. In an instant, every creature staring at Sato clutched their eyes in pain. Taking advantage of this moment, Sato immediately slipped into the surrounding crowd. By the time those blinded by Pikachu's flash regained their vision, Sato had already vanished without a trace. The red-haired girl and the two young men looked at each other in shock, their expressions turning ugly. They quickly began searching the crowd, but Sato seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Soon, they noticed the unfriendly gazes from nearby people. When they also saw several League enforcement officers approaching, their expressions changed drastically. Not daring to linger, they quickly left in a certain direction. Interestingly, that direction was exactly the same as the one the middle-aged man had taken earlier. Not bad, a chain setup, huh? Judging by the reactions of the people around, these guys have been fishing here for quite some time, and they seem to have some backing too. No one dares to mess with them. At the same time, Sato, disguised among the crowd with a generic face created by Ditto, watched the three leave using his psychic detection. After a brief moment of thought, a look of realization appeared on his face. If he wasn't mistaken, the middle-aged trainer from before and the red-haired girl's group were working together. The middle-aged man was just bait, while the girl and her companions, pretending to be victims, were the real trap. Sato quickly deduced how things would have played out if he hadn't escaped. The red-haired girl and the two young men would eventually apologize for mistaking him as a scammer, then gain his trust by posing as fellow victims. After that, they would invite him to explore the abandoned power plant together. If he agreed, only two outcomes awaited him. First, if he performed poorly during the exploration, they would devour him completely, leaving nothing behind. Second, if he performed well, they would use him to fight for treasures, then dispose of him once he was no longer useful. After thinking it over, Sato decided not to investigate them further for now. Instead, he began using subtle psychic detection to scan the surrounding crowd, hoping to locate Watson or other acquaintances. Unfortunately, he found no trace of them, neither among the civilians nor the League officers. Looks like Watson and the others have already entered the abandoned power plant, and the magnetic interference inside must be severe. My communicator can't even get through. After failing to reach them, Sato sighed helplessly. Meanwhile, in a clearing surrounded by dense forest nearby, the red-haired girl and the two young men stood there, heads lowered, trembling as if something terrifying was in front of them. Before long, another trio, 2 men and 1 woman, all young, arrived. Unlike the first group, these three wore expressions of excitement. Over the next 10+ minutes, the number of people gathered in the clearing grew to 15. At a glance, it was clear these individuals had undergone special training. They stood in neat formation, each group arranged as 2 men and 1 woman. Most of them wore excited expressions, while only a few, like the red-haired girl's group, looked tense. Soon, a burly man wearing a Team Magma uniform stepped forward with a grim expression. Behind him followed several others, including the middle-aged trainer who had previously interacted with Sato. the moment the burly man appeared, all whispers ceased. Everyone straightened up, adopting serious expressions. Some even looked at him with fanatical admiration. I will now announce those who have passed the test. Anyone whose name is not called may leave. The burly man scanned the group, then pulled out a list and spoke coldly. As he began reading names, those called beamed with joy, while those not called looked dejected. The red-haired girl and her two companions were fortunate. Despite botching their earlier task, they were not eliminated. Soon, only 12 people remained. Under the burly man's orders, they quickly changed into identical uniforms, the exact same as those worn by the League enforcement officers stationed at the entrance of the abandoned power plant. Indeed, the appearance of Zapdos had also attracted the attention of the powerful dark organization, Team Magma. However, most of their main forces were still focused on Groudon. Therefore, they had only dispatched a special elite unit this time to investigate. These 15 young people were part of the latest batch of recruits from Team Magma's Slateport branch, an elite selection. If nothing unexpected happened, many of them would eventually become spies sent into other organizations. At present, under the guidance of their instructor, they were undergoing field training. Working together to scam others was one of the tests they had been completing over the past few days. Judging from recent results, most of them had performed quite well, successfully deceiving many people and rapidly increasing their strength in the process. Now, the real test begins. After everyone had changed into their uniforms, the burly man spoke sternly. We must seize the object guarded by Zapdos before the League does. Even if we can't obtain it, we must not let the League get their hands on it. Yes, sir. We guarantee mission success. The moment he finished speaking, the members of Team Magma grew excited, responding in unison as they prepared for action. Chapter 837, Chapter 836, Breaking In. Waiting like this isn't a good solution. Should I use teleport to force my way in? But there are too many guards on the outer perimeter. I'd probably be discovered the moment I enter. Looks like the League is determined to secure this place. What a headache. Standing near the edge of the security perimeter at the entrance of the abandoned power plant, Sato used his psychic sensing to probe the situation inside. The more he saw, the more troubled he became. He had already been here for over an hour and had a fairly clear understanding of the situation. The reason the entrance to the abandoned power plant was under lockdown was that a Pokemon riot was currently taking place inside. According to the League's official explanation, they had sealed the entrance to prevent reckless trainers from going in and getting themselves killed. However, Sato knew that was only a surface-level justification. The League's true intention was to prevent latecomers from taking advantage of the chaos and reaping the benefits. If his guess was correct, the riot inside the power plant had likely been triggered by League personnel, or by some trainers who had already entered. They had probably encountered Zapdos, and provoked it. Clearly, time was running out. If he stayed here any longer, he might not even get a share of the spoils. Fortunately, among the large crowd of trainers gathered at the entrance, there was no shortage of impatient people. Most of them had come for Zapdos or treasures, and they all understood that the longer they delayed, the slimmer their chances became. Thus, before Sato could even decide to disguise himself as the masked figure and force his way in, a long brewing disturbance erupted. Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted for everyone to charge in together. Immediately, several prepared individuals took the lead, commanding their Pokemon to tear open multiple gaps in the security line set up by the League enforcers. The majority of trainers present had long been dissatisfied with the League's blockade. This resentment had built up over time, reaching a breaking point. All it needed was a spark. And those instigators became exactly that spark. Seeing others take the lead in ignoring the League's warnings, many trainers followed suit, thinking they can't punish everyone. Although the League enforcers at the entrance were not few in number, they were vastly outnumbered by the crowd. Moreover, as official personnel, they were restrained in their actions and unable to deal harshly with the surging mass of trainers. As a result, the defensive line was quickly overwhelmed. The tightly shut steel gate was smashed apart by the combined attacks of numerous Pokemon. With the defenses broken and the gate destroyed, even those who had been hesitating made their choice. They followed the crowd and rushed into the abandoned power plant. Sato blended into the crowd as well. However, to avoid being held accountable later by the League, he switched to his alternate bounty hunter identity, Raiden Suzuki. Seeing that they could no longer stop the influx, the League enforcers simply gave up trying to block them. They stood aside coldly, watching as Sato and the others entered. Some even showed mocking expressions in their eyes. The League's warning about a Pokemon riot was no exaggeration. Not long after entering, Sato and the others began encountering wild Pokemon with intense hostility in their eyes. Most of them were electric-type Pokemon, launching fast and fierce attacks. Under these sudden ambushes, many unprepared trainers immediately suffered heavy losses. Good thing I'm wearing a rubber suit underneath. Otherwise, with this density of electric-type attacks, I'd definitely be injured. Sato narrowly avoided an electro ball attack from a hidden electrode lurking in the shadows. However, because his body brushed against a metal wall, he was instantly caught in the aftermath of a nearby electrode's thunderbolt. Fortunately, his rubber suit protected him from being knocked unconscious by the powerful current. Very quickly, the first wave of trainers eliminated by wild Pokemon appeared, their numbers reduced by at least a third. The abandoned power plant was once known by the people of Mauville City as New Mauville. It wasn't just a power plant, it was an unfinished underground city. Originally, New Mauville was a massive long-term project led by Mauville Holdings, with Watson as its chief engineer. Unfortunately, due to the enormous scale of the reconstruction, the mayor of Mauville City feared it would disrupt nearby Pokemon habitats. In the end, the project was halted halfway through. Even so, as an underground city, its sheer size remained astonishing. Over the years, countless wild Pokemon had occupied and partially transformed it, turning it into a vast underground labyrinth. Although Sato and the other trainers seemed numerous, entering this enormous underground city was like a few drops of rain falling into a vast lake, utterly insignificant. After breaking through the first wave of wild Pokemon, Sato followed the crowd through an underground passage and arrived in a massive subterranean space filled with countless structures. Though these buildings were heavily decayed and overgrown with unknown vegetation, the sheer scale made it feel like he had entered a real city. For a moment, he felt incredibly small. Zapdos must be somewhere in this maze-like city. This is going to be troublesome. Enemies are everywhere. Looking at the towering, dilapidated buildings covered in vines, and sensing the hostility of the wild Pokemon lurking within, Sato's expression grew serious. Suddenly, rumble, rumble. A loud crashing sound came from the area to his right. Sato immediately turned to look. Roar. Just as his gaze shifted, a swift Manectric burst through a wall from a nearby building directly ahead of him. Its jaws, crackling with arcs of electricity, opened wide as it lunged toward him. At the same time, several Voltorb and Electrode of varying sizes rolled out rapidly from the hole in the wall. As they spun forward, their bodies glowed with blinding electric light. Chapter 838, Chapter 837, Drawing Closer. At this moment, the Pokemon standing beside Sato was Roserade, a Pokemon with a level as high as 62. Because of this, he felt no panic whatsoever toward the enemies he had already detected. Under Sato's telepathic command, Roserade immediately pressed one of her flower-like hands onto the ground. In an instant, several thorny vines burst out from the earth in front of Sato, tightly binding the incoming Manectric. The moment Manectric was restrained, it released a powerful surge of electricity, which traveled along the vines and struck Roserade. Unfortunately, this Manectric was only level 41. Its attack could not significantly affect the grass-type Roserade. As the vines glowed with a dazzling emerald light, Manectric quickly stopped struggling. At the same time, thanks to Roserade using Giga Drain, the minor injuries on her body rapidly healed. After instantly defeating Manectric, Roserade shifted her attention to the incoming Electrode and Voltorb rolling toward them at high speed. Raising both of her flower-like hands, she unleashed a rapid barrage of Bullet Seed. However, the Electrode and Voltorb were moving far too fast and in a scattered formation. Roserade's Bullet Seed only managed to knock down part of them. Just as the remaining Electrode and Voltorb were about to crash into them, a burst of white light emerged from the Pokeball in Sato's hand. Nidoking's massive body instantly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Sato used Teleport to appear atop Nidoking. Then, Nidoking's tail, glowing with a purple light, swept out in a crescent arc at lightning speed. In an instant, most of the incoming Electrode and Voltorb were sent flying by this poison tail. The few that managed to approach head-on were quickly shot down by Roserade's close-range Bullet Seed. What had been an extremely dangerous ambush was effortlessly resolved by Roserade and Nidoking in just over 10 seconds. That's amazing. He defeated so many wild Pokemon instantly, his reaction speed is insane. That guy's strong. Better not provoke him. Nearby trainers watched the scene with shock written all over their faces, quickly marking Sato as someone not to be messed with during this expedition. They had originally thought that Sato, being alone, would surely be finished after being ambushed, but the situation had reversed in an instant. Another unstable factor has appeared. Characteristics: Purple Mask, possesses Roserade and Nidoking. Likely the bounty hunter recently active in Slateport City, codename, Purple Mask. Number 9, report this immediately to the captain. Inside a building not far to Sato's left, a young man dressed in a League enforcement uniform observed everything through binoculars. After witnessing Sato's swift counterattack, he turned to a female companion holding a communicator covered in some kind of insulating material and spoke. Understood, Number 7. Number 9, also dressed in a League uniform, nodded and quickly transmitted the information via text through the communicator. If Sato had been there, he would have immediately recognized them. They were the red-haired girl who had tried to scam him earlier, along with one of her companions. At nearly the same time, in the underground city closer to the central area, a burly man leading 3 young subordinates was engaged in fierce battle with a group of wild Pokemon. The communicator on his body suddenly rang. Like his subordinates, the burly man was dressed in a League enforcement uniform. Upon hearing the alert, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He immediately took out a pokeball and released a level 53 Camerupt. With Camerupt joining the battle, the tide of victory quickly shifted in their favor. Before long, the group of wild Pokemon, mostly electric types, was completely defeated. After repelling the wave, the burly man quickly led his team away and entered a nearby building with relatively few wild Pokemon to rest briefly. A suspected purple mask. Humph, another one of the League's running dogs. The burly man pulled out a communicator identical to the one used by number 7. After reading the message, his expression darkened, and he muttered through gritted teeth. The identity Sato used, Raiden Suzuki, had not appeared often, but because he had captured numerous wanted criminals, most of them at least B rank and even several A rank, his reputation had quickly spread within the bounty hunter circle. This burly man was actually an elite member of Team Magma disguised as a League officer. Within Team Magma, he served both as a spy instructor and an intelligence officer. Thus, he was very familiar with Raiden Suzuki, the bounty hunter who had been assisting the League in capturing many wanted criminals. Meanwhile, after defeating the attacking wild Pokemon, Sato continued exploring the underground city. Using his psychic detection, he easily avoided areas densely populated with wild Pokemon and gradually made his way toward the city's central region. Ever since entering the underground city, he had faintly heard continuous explosions and thunder coming from the center. From this, he deduced that Zapdos was most likely located there. Sure enough, as he got closer, the sounds of battle and thunder became clearer. From a distance, he could even see a massive storm cloud crackling with lightning hovering over the very center of the underground city. Finally found you, Watson, though you look pretty miserable right now. Using long-range psychic detection, Sato quickly located Watson and a large number of League personnel. They were currently commanding their Pokemon in a fierce battle against a ferocious Zapdos. From the current situation, Zapdos clearly held the upper hand. It continuously summoned lightning from the storm clouds above, suppressing Watson and his team so thoroughly that they could barely lift their heads. It was evident that Watson's group had come prepared. Every one of them wore specialized rubber suits and almost all had a Rhydon with the lightning rod ability. However, what troubled them greatly was that this Zapdos had hidden power, water. Moreover, it was extremely experienced in battle. Many Rhydon were defeated by hidden power before they could make any real impact. Because they had lost so many Pokemon with the lightning rod ability, Watson and his team were gradually being pushed into a desperate struggle. Chapter 839, Chapter 838, Reinforcements arrive. Rain poured down in torrents as the fierce battle raged on. Enraged, Zapdos continuously released what seemed like an endless supply of electricity, all of which merged into the massive storm cloud above its head. Then, with a near-roaring cry, the underground city was once again plunged into a brief artificial daylight. Thick, bucket-sized bolts of lightning rained down wildly from the clouds, ravaging the already devastated ground. At the same time, countless water spheres crackling with electricity formed around Zapdos. Using hidden power, water, it condensed these orbs and fired them downward like a machine gun, relentlessly sweeping across the battlefield. Faced with these waves of terrifying lightning attacks, Watson and the other League members could barely evade them. For a time, they could only hide behind their ground-type Pokemon. Although ground types could channel electricity into the earth, they could not ignore the extreme heat generated by lightning strikes, nor the water spheres infused with electric power. Worse still, those spheres seemed capable of reducing insulation. Pokemon like Graveler, Golem, and Onix, lacking lightning rod, would suffer not only heavy damage from the water spheres but also secondary electric-type effects upon impact. After a prolonged battle, the ground-type Pokemon of the League forces were covered in charred burns. Many were severely injured, and a large portion had already lost the ability to fight. At this point, it often took 5 or 6 people to rely on a single ground-type Pokemon. As for non-ground types, aside from a few like Manectric, Electrike, Blitzel, and Zebstrika, those with lightning rod, most were in dire condition. The majority had already fainted. Even Watson and the others, despite wearing highly insulated rubber suits, were struggling. Each lightning strike generated terrifying heat, gradually melting their protective gear. Many had already been knocked unconscious after their suits lost their insulating properties. To make matters worse, the wild Pokemon that had been driven back earlier began to stir again upon sensing the League's weakening state. Slowly, they started forming a new encirclement. Damn it, this beast is too strong. We can't capture it with our strength alone. Listen up, prioritize the injured. Begin a phased retreat. Seeing that fewer than 1/3 of their forces remained combat capable, while Zapdos still showed no signs of weakening, and with hostile wild Pokemon closing in, Watson finally made the painful decision to order a retreat. The surrounding League members immediately showed expressions of relief. They quickly took out their Pokeballs and began recalling their fallen Pokemon. Scree. Seeing them attempt to retreat, Zapdos, having lost its treasure, was unwilling to let them go. It cried out sharply, summoning another barrage of thunder, then dove down like a fighter jet to attack the retreating forces. Humph. So you finally came down, you ragged bird. Ampharos, teach it a lesson, use Dragon Pulse. Riding atop Manectric, Watson's eyes lit up when he saw Zapdos descending. He immediately ordered his Ampharos, also mounted on a Manectric, to attack. This Ampharos was clearly his ace, at level 67. Upon receiving the command, it unleashed a massive dragon-shaped energy wave, surging forward toward Zapdos. Magnezone, Flash Cannon. Rhydon, Stone Edge. Raichu, Thunder. Several of Watson's capable subordinates halted their retreat and joined the attack, commanding their Pokémon to strike. But this wild Zapdos, a level 73 Elite Four tier Pokémon, had already boosted its speed to the maximum using agility. Combined with its superior flight technique, it moved with ease against the barrage. Like a slippery eel, Zapdos evaded every incoming attack. As it dodged, a dazzling white light began to shine from its body. By the time it had avoided all attacks, it had transformed into a gigantic radiant bird, Brave Bird activated. With a single beat of its wings, it turned into a streak of light and crashed toward Watson and his forces. In the next instant, the frontline trainers and Pokémon were sent flying, collapsing to the ground. This single Brave Bird strike instantly knocked out over a dozen Pokémon above level 50. Yet Zapdos did not stop. After executing Brave Bird, it shot upward again, then dove once more, its body once again blazing with blinding white light, clearly intending to repeat the attack. And its primary target this time was Watson himself. Watson had only survived the previous strike thanks to Ampharos's desperate protection. Even so, his thigh had been cut by the air blade generated by Brave Bird, and with his rubber suit damaged, the residual electricity had numbed his entire body. Looks like I'm too old for this. I might really fall here today. Seeing Zapdos charging at him again, a trace of despair rose in his heart. At the same time, with Watson and the League's key fighters heavily injured, the wild Pokémon lurking at the edges of the battlefield launched another assault under Zapdos's overwhelming presence. The League forces were now fighting for their own survival, no one could spare the strength to rescue Watson. But just as all seemed lost, a massive blue beam suddenly tore across the battlefield, shooting straight toward the radiant form of Zapdos. Where the beam passed, raindrops froze instantly into ice particles, revealing the terrifying ice-type energy within. Zapdos sensed the immense threat from the beam and was forced to dodge. Though it narrowly avoided the attack, its assault on Watson was completely disrupted. Yet just as it thought it could catch its breath, a Crobat suddenly appeared on its left. Seeing such an ordinary Pokémon daring to fly before it, Zapdos showed a hint of mockery. With a mere thought, it summoned the immense electrical power from the storm cloud above. A thick bolt of lightning instantly struck Crobat. But what shocked Zapdos was the insignificant insect before it remained completely unharmed. In fact, its aura surged dramatically. In the next instant, Crobat spread its four wings wide. A violent gale erupted, followed by countless massive white air blades, each several meters long, engulfing Zapdos. Chapter 840, Chapter 839, Turning the Tide of Battle. A barrage of white air blades compressed Zapdos's room for evasion to the extreme. However, as an Elite Four level Pokémon, Zapdos's physical strength and control over energy were far beyond that of Pokémon that had yet to reach the Elite Four level. Especially since Zapdos was also a flying-type Pokémon, coupled with its innate, overwhelming talent, its mastery over flying-type energy was second only to certain immensely powerful flying-type legendary Pokémon. In the thunderous sky, filled with lightning and roaring winds, Zapdos calmly spread its wings. In an instant, a violent gale, far stronger than anything Crobat had created, erupted. In a flash, the countless air blades generated by Crobat were swept up by the gale and vanished like snow under the blazing sun. An Elite Four level legendary Pokémon really is terrifying. Crobat's air blades were neutralized instantly. This must be the strength of an Elite Four level Pokémon. In terms of control over flying-type energy, Crobat is clearly not on the same level as Zapdos. There's at least a whole tier of difference. If Crobat's control is considered proficient, then Zapdos has already reached mastery. It can even interfere with the flying-type energy controlled by weaker opponents. On the rooftop of a crumbling building near the battlefield, Sato watched Zapdos effortlessly disperse Crobat's air cutter. Shock filled his heart as he analyzed the situation. At that moment, Watson, on the other side, also recognized that Sato and Crobat were allies. Seeing their battle, he immediately shouted, "Unknown ally. If your Pokémon hasn't reached Elite Four level, do not use electric or flying-type moves against Zapdos. Those attacks are ineffective against it." Sato nodded upon hearing this. A blue glow flashed in his eyes as he issued commands through telepathy. Crobat, use Shadow Ball, stall Zapdos as much as possible. Nidoking, Rose Raid, assist the League forces in breaking through. Before joining the battle, Sato had already made preparations. He had Kecleon use role-play and skill swap to copy the lightning rod ability from a Rhyhorn on the battlefield and distribute it to Nidoking, Crobat, and Roserade. At the same time, Whirlipede had used Baton Pass to transfer its accumulated boosts, gained from Speed Boost and Swords Dance, to Nidoking and Crobat. Thus, at this moment, both Nidoking and Crobat were in peak condition. The instant Sato gave his command, the three Pokémon sprang into action. In the sky, Crobat flapped its four wings violently, creating numerous afterimages. At the same time, highly condensed shadow balls shot toward Zapdos from all directions. Earlier, Crobat had been struck by Zapdos's powerful thunder, but thanks to temporarily possessing Lightning Rod, it suffered no real damage, aside from a slight warmth, and instead received a massive boost to its special attack. As a result, the shadow balls it launched now were extremely powerful, so much so that even Zapdos couldn't ignore them. However, Zapdos was over 10 levels higher and an Elite Four level Pokémon. Its physical prowess far surpassed Crobat's. Combined with its own use of agility, its speed had already reached its peak. In terms of flight speed, it was not inferior to Crobat, if anything, it was slightly superior. Seeing Crobat dare to challenge it in the air, Zapdos immediately displayed astonishing aerial maneuverability. While deftly dodging the incoming shadow balls, it rapidly closed the distance. At the same time, dazzling white light surged from its body once more, forming a massive radiant bird. Zapdos's combat experience was clearly immense. After realizing that Thunder not only failed to harm Crobat but instead strengthened it, it immediately abandoned its preferred electric-type attacks and switched to close combat with Brave Bird. Crobat knew full well the massive gap between them, so it avoided direct confrontation. Instead, it maintained a hit-and-run strategy, continuously firing shadow balls. Although Zapdos was disdainful of this tactic, Crobat's speed, only slightly inferior to its own, made it difficult to deal with in the short term. While Crobat and Zapdos engaged in a fierce aerial chase, Nidoking and Roserade wreaked havoc on the ground. With the speed and attack boosts passed down from Whirlipede via Baton Pass, and now possessing Lightning Rod, Nidoking charged through the battlefield like an unstoppable force. Almost no electric-type Pokémon could withstand even a single strike from it. Flames surged from its fists as it unleashed Fire Punch, while its tail, glowing with intense purple energy, swept across enemies with devastating force. Wherever Nidoking passed, electric-type wild Pokémon were crushed without resistance. In no time, the encirclement formed by the wild Pokémon was torn open with a massive breach. Roserade, meanwhile, was equally dazzling, perhaps even more eye-catching in certain ways. Thanks to Lightning Rod, her special attack was quickly boosted to its maximum under the barrage of electric-type attacks. Then, she began to dance, a beautiful yet deadly petal dance. Countless razor-sharp petals formed from grass-type energy shot out like lethal projectiles. Wherever her floral storm passed, wild Pokémon fell one after another beneath crimson petals. At the same time, under Sato's deliberate command, she frequently used vines to bind enemies before draining them with Giga Drain. The energy she absorbed was then converted into healing through grassy terrain, restoring nearby League members and their Pokémon. With Sato's sudden arrival as reinforcements, the previously one-sided battle began to stabilize rapidly. And thanks to Roserade's large-scale healing support, many combatants regained their strength and rejoined the fight. For a moment, morale on the League's side surged dramatically. Watson, possessing excellent battlefield awareness, seized the opportunity immediately. Everyone, listen up. The time to counterattack has come. Move out, support them. Seeing that Sato had stabilized, and was now turning the tide, Watson decisively ordered the League forces to stop retreating and instead advance to assist Sato in confronting Zapdos in the sky. Chapter 841, Chapter 840, Zapdos driven into a corner. Watson held tremendous prestige among the League members. With a single call to action, a large number of League personnel immediately responded. Under his command, they began to systematically direct their Pokémon to launch coordinated attacks on the Zapdos in the sky. The League's greatest advantage lay in numbers. This allowed them to easily form standardized combat units. Many of the personnel present were descendants of League members, born as part of the League's reserve force. However, while these individuals were spared the arduous process that civilian trainers faced when joining the League, their predecessors had already paved the way. Becoming a true League member was still no simple matter. Positions of power, such as gym leaders or Elite Four, were limited and required exceptional strength. Thus, most League families were only slightly better off than ordinary civilians. Yet the path of a trainer was extremely demanding. To become an independent and capable trainer required vast resources and a degree of luck. Compared to top-tier trainers, most League families still struggled to raise another trainer, even if they had advantages over ordinary households. But under the League's umbrella, there was shade. Even if individual families couldn't nurture a trainer alone, the League would step in to help, free of charge in the early stages. In later stages, those who succeeded simply needed to repay the League with loyalty. Of course, personalized education based on individual talent was impossible to implement on a large scale, even for an organization as resource-rich as the League. Therefore, unless exceptional talent was displayed, most descendants of League members received standardized training and education. The League's long history had refined its internal systems to perfection. As long as they weren't incompetent, these individuals would, through systematic education, become disciplined trainers who were deeply loyal to the League. These League-trained trainers, having undergone military-style training since childhood, were highly disciplined and coordinated, making them ideal for forming organized combat units. This time, the League had dispatched a squad of 100 trainers to support Watson in seizing the treasure and capturing Zapdos. They belonged to the League Army's ground-type corps. If conventional armies relied on standardized weapons, then these League trainer units used Pokémon as their standard armaments, and every member carried the same types of Pokémon. Moreover, both the trainers and their Pokémon had undergone specialized training, enabling them to combine their efforts to unleash powerful coordinated techniques. After receiving healing from Roserade's grassy terrain, the number of combat-capable League trainers, previously reduced to less than one-third, had recovered to about half. Now, under Watson's orders, they once again formed the same overwhelming offensive that had earlier forced Zapdos to retreat and crushed its subordinates. Under coordinated commands, groups of Rhydon and Rhyhorn quickly assembled into 4 neat formations at the 4 corners of the battlefield. All of these ground-type Pokémon possessed the Lightning Rod ability. Then, an astonishing scene unfolded. As the 4 formations simultaneously glowed with white light, the lightning bolts continuously falling from the sky were drawn by a powerful force. They split into 4 streams and were redirected into the formations below. For a moment, the lightning generated by Zapdos could no longer strike the League forces within those formations. Seizing this opportunity, numerous Graveler and Golem also gathered into several formations. Then, under the command of what appeared to be the squad leader, they all unleashed Stone Edge toward Zapdos. Through their combined effort, the power, speed, and accuracy of Stone Edge were amplified to an entirely new level. Faced with such a dense barrage of rock projectiles, Zapdos' expression changed drastically. It immediately abandoned its pursuit of Crobat and used its superb aerial maneuverability to evade. This was already the second time Zapdos had faced such a fierce assault from this ground-type League unit. At the beginning, it had nearly been defeated by this very tactic. The 4 formations of Rhyhorn and Rhydon had magnified the effect of Lightning Rod countless times, completely sealing off its most powerful electric-type attacks. Fortunately, Zapdos had access to Hidden Power, Water, a move that dealt massive damage to both the Rhyhorn and Golem formations. Combined with its aerial advantage, it had managed to gradually turn the tide. Now, darting through the air, Zapdos barely avoided the first wave of Stone Edge attacks. Just as it prepared to repeat its earlier tactic and strike the formations below with Hidden Power, Water, Crobat interfered again. A barrage of Shadow Ball shot out from Crobat, attacking from all directions, attempting to interrupt Zapdos' move. Although Zapdos could still freely command lightning in the skies, Crobat, an anomaly possessing Lightning Rod, rendered its signature electric attacks useless against it. At this moment, Zapdos deeply resented this insignificant insect it could normally crush with ease. But it knew priorities mattered. Enduring Crobat's attacks, it forcefully unleashed Hidden Power, Water, at the formations below. In an instant, numerous water spheres infused with electric energy formed around Zapdos and rained down like a storm upon the Rhyhorn and Golem formations. But the League had already learned from earlier mistakes. They immediately sent out large numbers of Pokémon to act as shields in front of the formations, doing everything possible to protect them. At the same time, morale surged. Under Sato's command, Roserade used Ingrain, drawing continuous healing energy from the ground to restore injured Pokémon. The battlefield now formed a perfect system. The Rhyhorn formation sealed Zapdos' electric attacks. The Golem formations provided the main offensive output. Crobat harassed from the air. Roserade served as the support corps, continuously restoring combat strength. For a moment, Zapdos was like a trapped beast sinking into a swamp, gradually being pushed into a desperate corner. Even an Elite 4-level legendary Pokémon has its limits. It's not like Kyogre or other god-tier beings that are nearly impossible to defeat. At this rate, Zapdos will fall into the League's hands soon. Sato looked at the battered Zapdos in the sky, then at the increasingly coordinated League forces below, and sighed inwardly. In his view, with Zapdos already affected by Crobat's mean look and taunt, it was like a turtle trapped in a jar, it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. Hey! What are you all doing? But at the critical moment, something unexpected finally happened. Several League members suddenly turned their attacks on the Rhyhorn formations. And worse. They struck all 4 formations simultaneously. Most critically of all, Roserade, who had been tirelessly maintaining grassy terrain to heal everyone, was also violently attacked. Chapter 842, Chapter 841, Failure and Direct Confrontation. This sudden ambush instantly disrupted what had been a smooth and growing offensive. The enemies hidden among the League personnel were highly organized and precise in their actions. They directly targeted and took down the leading Rhydon in each of the 4 Rhydon formations. In an instant, all 4 formations fell into chaos, their structure collapsing. With the formations broken, the lightning raining from the sky was no longer restrained. Under Zapdos's frantic control, bolts of thunder poured down wildly upon the League members and their Pokémon at the center. Even worse, Roserade, the crucial healer in this entire offensive, was severely injured. She had been struck by a fierce attack from a level 64 Magmortar. The attacker showed no mercy, directly commanding Magmortar to use Overheat on Roserade. Fortunately, the League forces understood Roserade's importance. Many personnel had been stationed nearby to protect her. The attacker withdrew immediately after striking, recalled Magmortar, and fled without hesitation. It was no surprise, if not for the fact that everyone's attention had been focused on Zapdos, and Roserade had been exhausted, the attacker would never have found the opportunity. And he knew full well that seriously injuring Roserade would enrage the League. If he lingered even a moment longer, he would be torn apart. With both the Rhydon formations and Roserade severely compromised, the pressure on Zapdos dropped instantly, and it knew this was its chance to turn the tide. Without hesitation, it split its focus. Using Brave Bird to temporarily block Crobat's Shadow Ball, it then unleashed Hidden Power, Water, at full strength toward the Rhydon and Golem formations below. The battlefield was still under rain. Under such conditions, the power of Hidden Power, Water, surged dramatically. Without Roserade's healing, the low special defense of Rhydon and Golem left them completely unable to endure the attack. In an instant, Zapdos's attack swept through them like cutting grass, effortlessly knocking down the very Pokémon that had just caused it so much trouble. Damn it! Who did this? Watson's face turned ashen with rage, his anger erupting into a furious shout. But he knew clearly that this was not the time to hunt down the traitor. The capture operation was on the brink of failure, he had to make a decision immediately. Otherwise, once Zapdos recovered, none of them would be able to escape. Listen up. The Zapdos capture operation has failed. All units, retreat immediately. Watson acted decisively, issuing the order without hesitation. At the same time, Sato's expression also turned grim. However, his anger wasn't because the operation had failed, it was because Roserade had been grievously injured. Fortunately, he saw several League trainers immediately rushing to treat her with high-quality medicine. Combined with her use of Ingrain, which continued to restore her body, her life was no longer in danger. Only then did Sato breathe a sigh of relief. Still, he knew that this operation was doomed. Without the Rhydon and Golem formations, the League had lost the ability to continue contending with Zapdos. Meanwhile, Crobat had already been exhausted after holding Zapdos off for so long. If not for sheer willpower, it would have collapsed long ago. Come back, Crobat. No need to hold it off any longer. Sato immediately ordered Crobat to retreat via telepathy. However, what troubled him was that Zapdos clearly had no intention of letting Crobat escape. The moment it noticed Crobat pulling back, it pursued with bloodshot eyes. Throughout the entire battle, Crobat had been the one that frustrated Zapdos the most. Its Shadow Ball had prevented Zapdos from freely using Hidden Power, Water. Its mean look had stopped Zapdos from escaping. Its taunt had even prevented it from retreating to nearby rooftops to use Roost. In short, Zapdos's hatred toward Crobat had reached the level of, even if the battle was lost, Crobat must die. Nidoking, go cover Crobat, use Ice Beam. Seeing Zapdos relentlessly chasing Crobat, Sato's expression darkened further. He quickly ordered Nidoking to assist. At this point, under the identity of Raiden Suzuki, Nidoking was the only Pokémon he had left that could still threaten Zapdos. Unlike Roserade, Nidoking lacked strong self-recovery abilities. Earlier, while covering the League's retreat, it had fought numerous wild Pokémon and sustained heavy injuries. Thus, Sato had previously kept Nidoking by his side, to protect him, recover, and occasionally fire off Ice Beam. Now, after some recovery and with the help of medicine, Nidoking had regained about 80% of its strength. But could an 80% strength Nidoking defeat a heavily injured Zapdos? That was hard to say. Nidoking showed no fear. Upon receiving the command, it immediately fired a massive icy blue beam from its mouth toward Zapdos, who was chasing Crobat. Although Nidoking's attack and speed boosts had faded, its special attack remained highly boosted thanks to its current Lightning Rod ability. Combined with the Life Orb's enhancement, this ice beam was extremely dangerous to the already wounded Zapdos. Zapdos, having fought Sato and the League forces for so long, possessed sharp battle instincts. It immediately sensed the threat from Nidoking, halted its pursuit of Crobat, and dodged the attack. At the same time, with a thought, it summoned thick bolts of lightning from the storm clouds above Sato, attempting to strike down the trainer controlling Crobat and Nidoking. But the moment the lightning fell, Sato had already used teleport to move away. Moreover, due to Nidoking's current lightning rod, the lightning bolts were redirected and all struck Nidoking instead. At that moment, Crobat finally escaped Zapdos's pursuit and returned safely to Sato's side. Come then, Zapdos. Let me see how much strength you still have left. Sato stepped out from cover, facing the powerful legendary Pokémon directly without fear. Using telepathy, he spoke to it. The moment his words fell, a thick bolt of lightning descended toward him, but halfway down, it was intercepted by Crobat and Kecleon. Shriek. Damn human. At the same time, Zapdos let out a furious, piercing cry and transformed into a massive being of pure lightning, charging straight toward Sato. Chapter 843, Chapter 842, Defeat and Capture. Quite arrogant, but do you really think you're still the same as before? Nidoking, use Sludge Bomb and teach it a lesson. Seeing that Zapdos had been successfully provoked and was charging recklessly toward him, Sato felt a flash of delight. He immediately used telepathy to command Nidoking to intercept it. Roar. At the thought of facing a legendary Pokémon head-on, the battle-hungry Nidoking had long been itching for a fight. Upon receiving Sato's order, he stepped forward to shield Sato, letting out a thunderous roar. A massive sphere of purple energy rapidly condensed in his mouth, then shot forward as a highly compressed beam of toxic energy toward the incoming Zapdos. Although Zapdos was an Elite Four level Pokémon, after battling Sato and the League forces for so long, it was already heavily injured and utterly exhausted. It was only holding on through its powerful physique and sheer willpower. Even so, its combat strength had dropped drastically. While its attacks still looked imposing, they were little more than a facade. Nidoking, on the other hand, had been conserving strength during the earlier battle and had recovered most of his power. Now, with a temporarily gained Lightning Rod ability boosting his special attack to astonishing levels, and further amplified by the Life Orb, his same-type Sludge Bomb was terrifyingly powerful. As a legendary Pokémon, Zapdos could clearly sense just how dangerous that attack was. If it took the hit head-on, it might not die, but being crippled was a very real possibility. That realization quickly cooled the rage ignited by Sato's taunt. Spreading its wings, Zapdos rapidly ascended, trying to evade the attack. Unfortunately, it was just a fraction too slow. Nidoking's Sludge Bomb grazed the left wing of the energy form Zapdos had created with Brave Bird. The collision instantly pierced through the energy construct, triggering a violent explosion of clashing energies. Boom. Moments later, Zapdos was blasted out of the explosion, its injuries worsening. It struggled to even stay airborne, panting heavily in midair. Only now did Zapdos realize it had been too reckless. Its greatest strength, electric-type attacks, was completely useless against this opponent. Worse, it was already gravely injured, unable to display even a fraction of its usual power. Meanwhile, the enemy held overwhelming advantage. For some reason, all of Sato's Pokémon seemed to possess abilities similar to ground types, ignoring electric attacks entirely and even absorbing electricity to grow stronger. Take Nidoking, for example. Normally, Zapdos could defeat it easily with hidden power, water. Yet now, it had lost in a direct clash, an unbearable humiliation. The more it thought about it, the clearer it became, this battle could not be won. A wise bird doesn't suffer unnecessary losses. Zapdos quickly decided to retreat for now, recover using Roost, and settle the score later. It shot one last glare at Sato and Nidoking, then, under the astonished gazes of nearby League personnel, turned and fled. Trying to run now. Not so easy. Crobat, use Mean Look. Nidoking, Ice Beam. Seeing Zapdos retreat, Sato smiled coldly and immediately issued commands. At the same time, a faint blue glow flickered in his eyes as he secretly used telepathy to command Kecleon, who had been invisible all along. Crobat, having recovered some stamina thanks to the gem-grade poke block Sato had given him earlier, was no longer on the verge of collapse. In the next instant, Crobat's eyes glowed crimson as he locked onto the fleeing Zapdos. Illusory blood-red eyes appeared all around Zapdos, binding it in place. Mean Look succeeded. Zapdos was instantly restrained by an invisible force, unable to move more than 10 meters away. Having already suffered from this move earlier, Zapdos' anger flared again. But seeing Nidoking's powerful Ice Beam incoming, it had no choice but to use Protect to block. However, just as it barely finished blocking the attack and prepared to descend and use Roost, a second Icy Beam suddenly shot up from the ground behind it. It was Kecleon. Under Sato's command, Kecleon had used its invisibility to circle behind Zapdos and launched a surprise Ice Beam. Like Nidoking, Kecleon had also gained the Lightning Rod effect earlier, boosting its special attack after intercepting Zapdos' thunder. Already on the brink of defeat, Zapdos was pushed over the edge by this attack. Worse still, the secondary effect triggered. A thick layer of ice rapidly formed, freezing Zapdos solid. Thud. Encased in ice, Zapdos fell from the sky and crashed onto the ground. Even so, as expected of a legendary Pokémon, it had not lost consciousness. Its eyes burned with unwillingness and fury as it stared at Sato through the ice. Sato could clearly feel its rage and refusal to accept defeat, but he had no intention of letting it go. A legendary Pokemon was now within his grasp, there was no way he would give it up. In the next moment, a special Pokeball appeared in his hand, its upper shell marked with a lightning emblem. This was a lightning ball, obtained from an electric-type specialist. Its effect was simple, it greatly increased the capture rate of electric-type Pokemon. Winner takes all. No matter how unwilling you are, defeat is defeat. Go, Pokeball. Sato used teleport to instantly arrive in front of Zapdos with his Pokemon, then threw the lightning ball. The ball struck the frozen Zapdos and absorbed it in a flash of red light. Perhaps Zapdos was too weakened, or perhaps the lightning ball's effect was truly exceptional. The ball shook violently on the ground. Then, after a few moments, it stopped. The red light on its button flickered, and went out. Chapter 844, Chapter 843, A Difficult Choice. When Watson and the other League members saw that Zapdos had shifted its target to Sato, they immediately stopped retreating and prepared to go help. What they never expected, however, was that Zapdos would actually lose to Sato. As a result, while Sato battled Zapdos, the hearts of countless trainers on the battlefield were tightly gripped. Especially when Sato defeated Zapdos, many people immediately began harboring their own ulterior thoughts. Soon, under everyone's watchful eyes, Zapdos, this legendary Pokemon, was captured by Sato, who was currently acting under the identity of the bounty hunter Raiden Suzuki. The allure of a legendary Pokemon like Zapdos to trainers was immense. Just as Sato was about to pick up the Pokeball, 7 or 8 trainers had already surrounded him, each eyeing him greedily, with several powerful Pokemon at their sides. Among them, Watson also rushed over with a group of League trainers. "Friend, Zapdos is not something you can possess. Hand it over to the League. We will certainly remember your contribution this time." Watson stepped forward from the crowd, completely ignoring the non-League trainers nearby, and spoke politely to Sato. To be honest, his old face flushed slightly as he said this. He knew that without Sato's help, the League forces would have been wiped out by Zapdos. In the end, it was Sato alone who had defeated and captured it. Of course, he also knew that Sato's success wasn't entirely independent, the League had contributed as well. And since Zapdos was one of their mission objectives, he forced himself to make this request. Quite the hot potato, huh? But if you think I'll hand it over that easily, you're mistaken. I, Raiden Suzuki, am a bounty hunter. A favor from the League is too big, I can't afford it. Give me something tangible instead. Hearing Watson try to exchange a mere favor for Zapdos, Sato sneered inwardly and shook his head. The moment he finished speaking, a flash of blue light appeared in his eyes. Crobat beside him immediately unleashed a piercing screech, screech activated. In an instant, caught off guard, everyone present, including their Pokemon, clutched their ears in pain. Seizing the moment, Sato used teleport and vanished along with his Pokemon. When he reappeared, he was already beside Roserade. After some time recovering, Roserade's injuries were mostly healed. Several League members were guarding her, but when Sato suddenly appeared with his Pokemon, their expressions changed drastically as they prepared to attack. Unfortunately for them, Roserade acted first. Her hands plunged into the ground, and countless vines burst forth, binding the League members and their Pokemon tightly. Sato nodded at Roserade, then quickly recalled her and Nidoking into their Pokeballs. At the same time, he released Kadabra. After completing these actions, he used teleport again, rapidly moving toward the surface. He's escaping. Stop him. Leave Zapdos behind. Zapdos is in his hands, block him. By now, the trainers on the battlefield had all reacted. They chased after Sato while shouting loudly. However, Sato had always been extremely cautious. Along the way, he had already set up multiple psychic coordinates to ensure a smooth retreat. With these markers, the range of his teleport was greatly extended. Just as he was about to activate one of those coordinates with his psychic power, the hidden snakes within the League made their move again. Mytiana, use taunt. Crobat, mean look. Don't let him escape. A burly man in League enforcement uniform, not far from Sato, released a Mytiana and a Crobat, shouting loudly. I knew someone would interfere. Kadabra, it's up to you, Magic Coat. Sato had already spread his psychic power across the area and detected the man's actions instantly. He immediately issued the command through telepathy. Kadabra stepped forward, blocking Sato, eyes glowing blue. A surge of psychic energy erupted, forming a special mirror in front of him. As soon as it appeared, Mytiana's taunt and Crobat's mean look were reflected back. The burly man's attempt to stop Sato collapsed instantly. With the obstruction neutralized, Sato successfully activated a psychic coordinate hidden inside a building over 100 meters away and used teleport. In the next second, the trainers chasing him were left stunned, Sato had vanished without a trace. Sigh. I knew we couldn't keep him. None of these psychic trainers are simple. They have far too many ways to save themselves. Seeing no sign of Sato, Watson sighed in resignation, though there was also a sense of relief on his face. In his view, the mission had already failed, and they had nearly lost their lives. It was only thanks to Sato that they had survived. As for the battle against Zapdos, he understood it clearly, although the Rhydon and Golem formations contributed greatly. Without Crobat's interference and Roserade's healing, it would all have been meaningless. Thus, even though Sato ultimately captured Zapdos, Watson personally found it acceptable. In fact, many League trainers shared the same sentiment. Seeing Sato escape successfully, they all felt a weight lifted from their shoulders. What's this? Looks like we still have a chance. Just as Watson was about to lead everyone away, he noticed a small slip of paper where Sato had been standing. Picking it up, he couldn't help but smile wryly. On the paper was Sato's contact number. An experienced man like Watson immediately understood the implication. Sato was still inclined to hand Zapdos over to the League, but not for free. A minute or two later, Sato successfully returned to the surface using his psychic coordinates. Without stopping, he continued to use teleport, heading deeper into the jungle. Only after reaching the depths of the forest and confirming there were no pursuers nearby did he finally stop. Looking at the pokeball in his hand, its surface faintly crackling with electricity, Sato fell into deep thought. Should I sell you to the League in exchange for resources, or keep you for myself? This really is a difficult choice. Chapter 845, Chapter 844, The Final Choice. As expected, it still doesn't work. It seems that legendary Pokémon with larger populations don't contain any origin power. There's really no way to take shortcuts. A legendary Pokémon without origin power is already this troublesome. If it actually had it, its strength would probably be countless times greater. At that level, without absolute power, no amount of people would make a difference in trying to capture it. Just look at how this Zapdos defeated the League. That kind of Pokémon is no longer afraid of being swarmed by low-tier forces. After releasing Zapdos, Sato attempted several times to use the system to extract origin power from it. When all attempts failed, he decisively gave up, feeling somewhat helpless. He then shifted his gaze to the Zapdos frozen in solid ice, pondering how to deal with this extremely troublesome Pokémon. There was no doubt, his act of capturing Zapdos this time was essentially snatching prey from the jaws of the League. Although he had contributed greatly during the battle between the League and Zapdos, he knew the League would never simply hand it over because of that. Sato estimated that it wouldn't be long before the League dispatched elite trackers to find him. At the same time, they would likely contact him through the communication number he had left behind, using technological means to pinpoint his location. And it wouldn't just be the League. Other factions that learned of the news would also spring into action. His current situation was extremely unfavorable. In the end, it all comes down to strength. If I had top Elite 4 level power, this Zapdos in my hands would only boost my combat strength, and neither the League nor other factions would dare act rashly. A powerful Pokémon that can't immediately be converted into combat strength is truly a curse. This is what they mean by, a man is innocent, but his treasure invites trouble. Thinking of everything that might happen next, Sato couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The League, a colossal entity, had countless experts. During the previous super legendary incident, they hadn't even gone all out. But this time, his act of seizing Zapdos would undoubtedly anger certain figures within the League. The days ahead would not be easy. However, the League was only a secondary concern. What troubled Sato the most right now was Zapdos itself. Although Zapdos was a legendary Pokémon with Elite 4 level strength and extraordinary physical resilience, its injuries were severe. It had already fallen completely unconscious. If it wasn't treated soon, its life would be in danger. As for how to treat it, Sato wasn't worried. He had Roserade, a Pokémon capable of using grassy terrain for healing. What truly concerned him was what would happen after Zapdos recovered. Zapdos had not been captured through his own strength, and as an Elite 4 level legendary Pokémon, it would never obey his commands. Worse, once healed, it might not only refuse to thank him, it might immediately attack him. Yet its injuries couldn't be delayed any longer. If he missed the best treatment window, the damage could become irreversible. Even if it survived, it might be crippled, or worse, die outright. This is really troublesome. It seems I'll have to seek outside help. Sato quickly considered possible solutions, but in the end, he could only come up with one relatively safe option. That was, to entrust Zapdos to someone he trusted, someone strong enough to suppress it. After thinking it over, only two candidates came to mind. Professor Oak, or Giovanni. Both possessed champion-level strength. To them, Zapdos was merely a somewhat stronger Pokémon. Suppressing it would pose no difficulty. However, Sato also knew that no matter which of the two he chose, he might temporarily, or even permanently, lose ownership of Zapdos. Professor Oak belonged to the League. With his sharp mind and vast information network, he would quickly deduce Zapdos's origin. At that point, he might very well return it to the League. Of course, Oak was reasonable. He would likely strive to secure compensation for Sato, and Sato would also avoid being targeted by the League. As for Giovanni, things were less certain. Although Giovanni was known for being fair, that depended on the situation. Zapdos, after all, was a legendary Pokémon, a strategic resource. If Sato handed it over, it might very well be like throwing meat to a dog, never to return. Of course, Giovanni would compensate him, perhaps even allowing him to choose from various pseudo-legendary Pokémon. But choosing Giovanni meant continuing to face the League's hostility, and over time, that pressure would only intensify. After a fierce internal struggle, Sato finally made his decision. He would entrust Zapdos to Professor Oak. To be honest, it wasn't about avoiding the League's pursuit, it was because he simply couldn't bear to lose Zapdos. In his view, giving it to Professor Oak gave him a far higher chance of retaining ownership than handing it to Giovanni. Professor Oak was approachable and held immense authority within the League. If he were willing to advocate for Sato, there was a strong chance that Sato could keep Zapdos. But if he handed it to Giovanni, getting it back would be nearly impossible. Giovanni, after all, was the ruthless leader of Team Rocket. He would never allow something so valuable to slip beyond his control. Sato knew that Giovanni wouldn't take it by force, he would provide a perfectly reasonable justification. Something as simple as, "You currently lack the ability to control Zapdos." And promises like, "You can have it back when you're strong enough," would merely be empty words. Even if Sato truly reached Elite 4 level strength in the future, Giovanni would never return Zapdos. By then, it might already belong to a Rocket executive. If Sato wanted it back, the only way would be to defeat that Elite 4 level executive. Otherwise, it would be impossible. Legendary Pokémon were incredibly rare. Sato had finally obtained the chance to capture one, how could he possibly give it up willingly? Especially one as powerful as Zapdos. At the end of the day, he was still a trainer who pursued strength. His strongest Pokémon, Swampert, was already close to breaking through to Elite 4 level. When that happened, he believed Swampert would be strong enough to defeat Zapdos. And once he fully subdued Zapdos, his combat power would skyrocket, he would no longer be considered weak even among Elite 4 trainers. Moreover, Zapdos fit perfectly into his Rain team composition. It even possessed Hidden Power, Water, a move that countered Ground and Rock-type Pokémon. Sato was certain that with an Elite 4 level Swampert and Zapdos in his Rain team, his strength would increase dramatically. And when that time came, he would no longer need to live at the mercy of others. Chapter 846, Chapter 845, Aftermath Handling. After making his decision, Sato swiftly recalled Zapdos into a Pokeball. Then, he immediately switched back to his true identity, Sato, and changed all of his clothes. To eliminate the smell of blood on him, he even took a shower and sprayed perfume strong enough to mask his scent. Only after completing all the necessary disguises did he mount Crobat and fly toward the direction of Mauville City. More than 10 minutes later, at a Pokémon Center in the southern outskirts of Mauville City, Sato was in the Pokémon transfer area, conducting a remote video call with Professor Oak. "Sato, this time you've really brought me both a huge surprise and a huge problem." At this moment, far away in Pallet Town, Professor Oak had already received the Pokeball containing Zapdos through the time capsule transfer system. After examining Zapdos, which was still frozen, and listening to Sato's explanation, he spoke with mixed emotions. "Professor, just do what you can. If it really doesn't work out, then hand it over to the League, I don't have any objections." Hearing this, Sato took a deep breath and said somewhat ingratiatingly. There was no turning back now. As long as the problem of Zapdos refusing to obey remained unresolved, keeping it was like holding a ticking time bomb. It was far better to entrust it to someone like Professor Oak, who was easier to reason with. Although handing Zapdos over meant that his completely unknown identity as Raiden Suzuki would now be exposed to Professor Oak, it would all be worth it if Zapdos could be kept in the end. Moreover, judging from Oak's tone, he seemed quite interested in researching Zapdos. That meant the chances of keeping it were fairly high. "You sly kid, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Don't worry, I'll do my best to help you secure it. To be honest, I've never had the chance to study Zapdos up close. Such an important research subject is extremely rare, I wouldn't want to hand it over to anyone else. Besides, based on what you told me, the League's mission this time had already failed. You stepped in and prevented their total annihilation, that's a huge contribution. As for the later capture operation, you also played a major role. Without you, the League wouldn't have had any chance at all. As for Zapdos being captured by you in the end, it can only be called a fortunate coincidence, it doesn't count as you forcibly taking it from the League. So I'm quite confident I can help you keep Zapdos. After all, this old face of mine still carries some weight in the League." Seeing Sato like this, Professor Oak smiled faintly and carefully analyzed the pros and cons of the situation. "Since you say that, Professor, I feel much more at ease." Hearing this, the anxiety in Sato's heart finally settled, and he responded with visible relief. Alright, let's leave it at that for now. I need to settle this as soon as possible. Based on the League's habits, since they haven't been able to find you through normal means for so long, they'll probably send out their special units. You need to be careful. Don't get found. Those killing machines trained within the League are not to be trifled with. With your current strength, you likely won't be able to defeat them, and escaping would be difficult too. Professor Oak nodded, then quickly dropped his smile and spoke in a serious tone. After so many years of development, the League was no longer the pure and spotless organization he once knew. As it grew stronger, power struggles between regional leagues became increasingly intense. And from those terrifying struggles, certain dreadful creations were born, special units being one of them. They were the League's cleaners. Anyone who dared challenge the League's authority would face them. I understand. I'll keep a low profile during this time. Seeing Oak's serious expression, Sato immediately realized how dangerous these special units must be, likely even equipped with methods to counter psychic users. His expression turned grave as he nodded. Soon after, Sato ended the video call. When he stepped out of the Pokemon Center again, he had already switched back to his Tyler identity, having taken another shower and changed clothes once more. Kid sure knows how to stir up trouble, but he's incredibly lucky to actually capture a Zapdos by chance. Still, losing a bit of face in exchange for the opportunity to study Zapdos up close, definitely worth it. After ending the call, Professor Oak released Zapdos. After carefully examining it, he nodded in satisfaction. Dragonite, take it and thaw it out, then treat it. If it doesn't behave, give it a beating, just don't kill it. He then called over Dragonite and handed over the tasks of treatment and taming. Once Dragonite easily shattered the ice and carried Zapdos out of the room, Oak took out a phone book from his drawer and dialed a number recorded inside. Soon, the video call connected. The image of a stern-looking elderly man appeared on the screen. Old friend, so it's you. Long time no see. Do you still remember the favor you owed me years ago? I'd like to discuss something. I have a junior. Seeing who it was, Professor Oak smiled and began negotiating. Meanwhile, as Professor Oak was bargaining with a high-ranking official of the Hoenn League who had once been his comrade in arms, Sato had already returned once again to Horn's ice cream shop. There, he ran into Watson, who was happily eating ice cream. At this time, Watson was no longer the disheveled figure from the abandoned power plant. He had returned to his usual neat and eccentric old self. However, it seemed that because the mission hadn't been fully successful, he had received some reprimand from the League and was feeling rather down, complaining endlessly to Horn. Oh! Isn't this Tyler? Come, sit here. Watson quickly noticed Sato as he entered. Seeing his friend, his gloom faded noticeably, and he cheerfully called him over. Sato didn't stand on ceremony. He walked over, sat down beside Watson, and began chatting with him. Chapter 847, Chapter 846, Tracking. I heard from Horn that you went to the abandoned power plant on a mission. Because of Zapdos, I originally wanted to go take a look as well, and maybe help you out along the way. But unfortunately, the entrance was sealed off by the League enforcement team at the time, and I couldn't reach you through your communicator either, so I had no choice but to leave early. I didn't expect you to come back so quickly. But judging by your expression, the mission didn't go very smoothly, did it? What exactly happened in there? Sato took a glass of iced lemonade from Horn. After taking a sip, he spoke to Watson, who looked rather dejected. Although he was asking knowingly, Watson was the main person in charge of this mission. Sato still wanted to probe him for information, to get a glimpse of the League's attitude toward him. Ah, don't even mention it. It's a good thing you didn't go in, otherwise, as a trainer specializing in water-type Pokemon, you'd have been in serious danger. That Zapdos was way too powerful. If not for a strong expert showing up at the critical moment, I might not have made it back. Unfortunately, Zapdos was still captured by someone else in the end. I just got back from being chewed out. Talk about bad luck. This mission was clearly beyond our capabilities from the start. The fact that we managed to retrieve the treasure and retreat safely is already impressive. But those old guys sitting in their offices all day only know how to criticize. They don't treat people like us, who fight on the front lines, like human beings at all. Watson was clearly holding in a lot of frustration. He had just been venting to Horn earlier, and now that Horn had slipped away, and since Sato was both his friend and now a member of the League, he had no reservations and explained everything in detail. I see, then it really isn't your fault. If anyone's to blame, it should be those enemies who infiltrated the League team. If they hadn't caused trouble at the critical moment, Zapdos would have been yours. As for that mysterious expert who ended up getting Zapdos, you can only say they were lucky, but they also had the strength. Otherwise, they would have been killed by Zapdos long ago. And Zapdos is a legendary Pokemon. What trainer wouldn't want it? Something that valuable, if that person were willing to hand it over so easily, that would be pure fantasy. So honestly, this responsibility doesn't fall entirely on you. After listening to nearly half an hour of complaints, Sato felt like he couldn't take it anymore. Seizing the moment when Watson paused to drink, he quickly voiced his opinion. Although most of Watson's words were complaints about the League's punishment, Sato had already gleaned the key point: the League's attitude toward the one who took Zapdos was extremely unfriendly. As it turned out, the League executive who had ordered Watson to capture Zapdos flew into a rage upon learning that it had been taken by Sato. Not only did he harshly reprimand Watson and the other mission leaders on the spot, but, just as Professor Oak had predicted, he immediately applied to dispatch a special task force to track Sato down. This is troublesome. I just hope Professor Oak has good news. Otherwise, I'd better keep a low profile for a while. Learning that the League had sent a special team after him, Sato's heart sank. Exactly. You're the only one who understands, little brother. If only that guy thought like you. Ah, forget it, come on, drink with me. Tonight, we won't stop until we're drunk. Hearing Sato's words, Watson perked up and nodded enthusiastically. He drained his glass in one go and reached for the bottle to pour more for Sato. Hey. Are you treating my ice cream shop like a bar now? That's enough drinking. Tyler, help me out here. If this guy gets completely drunk and something urgent happens in Mauville City, he's really going to be in trouble. Horn, who had been watching closely, quickly came out from behind the counter and snatched the bottle from Watson, speaking irritably. Sato knew that letting Watson continue drinking was a bad idea. Horn was still running a business, and he was right. Watson had just been reprimanded and punished. If anything else went wrong, he might even lose his position as gym leader. So as soon as Horn spoke, Sato joined in persuading Watson. After some effort, the two of them finally escorted him back to his residence. Afterward, Sato bid farewell to Horn. Then, in a secluded spot nearby, he changed his clothes and put on a human skin mask transformed by Ditto, taking on an ordinary, unremarkable face. After that, he hailed a taxi and headed toward the western suburbs. Nearly an hour had passed since his communication with Professor Oak ended, yet he still hadn't received any reply. This suggested that negotiations with the Hoenn League's upper management were not going smoothly. From Watson, he had also learned that the League had already dispatched a special task force to track him down. Since they knew he was a psychic, the fact that they still sent this team meant they must possess highly advanced tracking methods. To avoid exposing the identity of Tyler, Sato decided it would be safer to maintain his identity as Raiden Suzuki for now and leave the city to lie low. While Sato was riding in a taxi toward Route 117, two groups of men and women dressed in black League uniforms appeared at the place where he had previously rested in the forest outside the abandoned power plant. The scent trail ends here. I'm guessing he rested here briefly before flying into the sky on a flying Pokémon. My Houndoom can't find any trace of his scent nearby anymore. One of them, a stern-looking green-haired man, crouched down and examined the footprints on the ground. After patting his Houndoom, which had just finished sniffing around and shaking its head, he spoke to his teammates. Looks like normal methods won't work. Yunzi, it's your turn. Another man with a burly build and red hair frowned slightly and turned to a pale-faced black-haired woman standing to the side. Let me be clear, I can't guarantee I'll find him. He's a psychic, and judging from this, his mental strength isn't weak. Divination results could be heavily interfered with. The black-haired woman slowly opened her dull, lifeless eyes and spoke in a weak tone. As soon as she finished speaking, a Jengar emerged from her shadow. It opened its mouth and pulled out a purple crystal ball from within. The woman took the crystal ball, held it reverently with both hands, and slowly closed her eyes. At that moment, the Magatama pendant around her neck began to glow with a strange light. A powerful aura emanated from her body, causing her long black hair to move without wind. In an instant, the purple crystal ball in her hands shone brightly, before quickly dimming again. The next moment, an incredible scene appeared within the crystal ball. An image of Sato sitting in a taxi. However, the image was extremely vague and abstract, his appearance could not be discerned at all. Chapter 848, Chapter 847, The Tracker. Unfortunately, the image inside the purple crystal ball lasted for less than a second before the entire crystal ball suddenly shattered. At the very moment it exploded, the black-haired woman named Yunzi seemed to suffer a heavy blow from some unknown force. Her body was thrown backward, and she spat out a large mouthful of blood. Her already pale face turned even more deathly white. He is someone who cannot be seen. Yunzi collapsed to the ground, clutching her chest and gasping for breath. After uttering those words, she fainted. How is that possible? Yunzi is a mid-level spiritualist. No matter how strong that person is, he should at most be a mid-level psychic. Yet she couldn't even glimpse him through divination. A blonde woman nearby hurried over to support Yunzi. After confirming that she had merely fainted and wasn't seriously injured, she let out a sigh of relief, though her face was filled with disbelief. TCH, what a troublesome target. Captain, what do we do now? Yunzi said he's someone who cannot be divined. That means mystical methods like divination are useless for finding him. The green-haired man stood up, glanced coldly at the unconscious Yunzi, then turned to the burly man and asked. The mission must be completed. Since Yunzi's methods won't work, we'll switch to technological means. Lucen, contact the information department. Get them to help us locate him. The trainer who obtained Zapdos calls himself Raiden Suzuki. It's obviously a fake name, but if we can find any visual records of him, we should be able to trace some clues. The burly man paused briefly and thought before giving his orders. Understood. I'll handle it now. Lucen nodded and immediately took out a uniquely designed communicator, dialing a number from his contact list. Soon, he got in touch with someone from the Hoenn League headquarters information department. After explaining the situation, the other side began their investigation. However, half an hour passed. Yunzi regained consciousness, yet Lucen and the others still received no information. Their expressions gradually turned grim. Another 10 minutes later, the burly man's communicator finally rang, but instead of intelligence, it carried a command. Terminate the mission. After relaying the order, the atmosphere among the four grew heavy. All of them showed deep unwillingness in their eyes. Raiden Suzuki. It's been a long time since we've encountered prey as interesting as you. We'll remember you. The four exchanged glances, each thinking roughly the same thing. Meanwhile, Sato had already set up a campsite beside a small river along Route 117. He had just received good news from Professor Oak, putting him in an excellent mood. Who's sneaking around over there? Come out. Just as he was about to remove the ditto human skin mask from his face, Sato suddenly frowned. Turning toward a large tree about 100 meters away, he shouted sharply. As expected of Mr. Raiden Suzuki. I had only just approached within 100 meters, and you already noticed me. Just as the intel said, you truly are a powerful psychic. The next moment, a black-robed figure wearing a ghost-faced mask slowly stepped out from behind the tree, speaking in a mocking tone. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly crossed dozens of meters in an instant, appearing directly in front of Sato. You're a psychic too. No, that's not right. I didn't sense any psychic fluctuations from you just now, you can't be a psychic. Sato's expression turned serious. His hands tightened around two pokeballs he had just taken from his belt. He. If I were a true psychic, that would be wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm not as fortunate as you. I'm only able to do that thanks to this little guy. Take a look, his psychic talent isn't bad, right? The black-robed man chuckled and continued in a strange tone. Then, a Pokemon with feathers different from a normal Natu appeared on his shoulder, staring at Sato with malicious intent. A shiny Natu. You're quite lucky. Did you use it to find me? Sato's face changed slightly. After discreetly scanning it with his system, he spoke. From the scan, he learned that this shiny Natu possessed a unique ability called Seer, which greatly enhanced its power to foresee the future. Sato immediately deduced that the black-robed man had likely tracked him using this powerful precognitive ability. At the same time, under his silent command, a Kecleon perched on his shoulder quietly crawled down his body, slipping toward the ground to circle behind the enemy. Heh. Mr. Raiden Suzuki, as a psychic, you should understand psychic-type Pokemon well. That little trick of yours won't escape my notice. But you're wrong. I didn't find you using this little fellow. While its future sight ability is strong, you are special. It simply doesn't work on you. So, to track you down, I had to borrow a better helper from home. Thanks to him, I was able to find you. Come out, say hello. Before Kecleon could complete its ambush, the black-robed man suddenly laughed, his eyes full of amusement. In the next instant, the grass beneath Kecleon grew wildly, wrapping around it and binding it tightly. Immediately after, a small, light green Pokemon flew out from a nearby patch of dense grass. It circled in the air a few times before stopping between the two, its gaze fixed firmly on Sato, whose expression had turned extremely grim. You, who exactly are you? The moment Sato saw the Pokemon, his face changed drastically. He instantly used teleport to retreat several meters, his entire body tense as if facing a formidable enemy. Because the Pokemon that had just appeared, completely evading even his psychic detection, was none other than the time-traveling Pokemon, the god of the forest. Shelebi. Chapter 849, Chapter 848, A Short Temper. Hey, who I am isn't important. What matters is that today, I'm taking something from you. If Mr. Suzuki is willing to cooperate, I won't do anything to you. But if you refuse, I can't guarantee what will happen next. Hearing this, the man in the black robe stepped forward, fixing Sato with a sharp gaze. At this moment, his hands hidden beneath the robe had already quietly gripped two Pokeballs. If Sato made the slightest suspicious move, he would immediately strike to kill. So you're here for Zapdos as well. Unfortunately, I can tell you clearly, it's no longer in my possession. I've temporarily entrusted it to someone strong enough to completely suppress it. I doubt you or the organization behind you could take it from them. Sato smiled and shook his head as he replied. The black-robed man didn't believe a word of it. In his eyes, Sato was simply unwilling to hand over Zapdos. After all, if it were him, he wouldn't give up a legendary Pokémon at elite level so easily either. However, he also knew that a trainer capable of capturing such a Zapdos was not someone to be taken lightly. Even if he won, the cost would be enormous. You think I'd believe that? Let me give you some advice, hand over Zapdos obediently. It's not something a trainer of your level can possess. Until you become an Elite Four trainer, it will only bring you endless trouble. But don't worry, we won't take it for free. I know that with your ability, that Zapdos won't obey you anyway. If you hand it over to us, we'll give you a completely obedient Zapdos in return. How about it? A very fair deal, isn't it? He suppressed his temper for the moment and attempted both intimidation and persuasion, hoping to complete the organization's mission with minimal cost and without bloodshed. Ah, so it's those people. No wonder you've got Celebi. No wonder the Celebi felt so strange, both its strength and aptitude are so poor. After hearing this, a glimmer of realization flashed in Sato's eyes. The last trace of concern in his heart vanished. Celebi, data. Pokemon, Celebi. Level. Type, Psychic/Grass. Ability, Natural Cure. Gender, none. Known moves, Leech Seed, Confusion, Recover, Heal Bell, Safeguard, Magical Leaf, Ancient Power, Baton Pass, Natural Gift, Heal Block, Future Sight. Egg moves, none. Tutor moves, none. TM moves, Protect, Hidden Power, Grass, Hyper Beam, Psychic, Shadow Ball, Energy Ball, Double Team, Grass Knot, Seed Bomb, Water Pulse, Shock Wave. Held item, Miracle Seed. IVs. HP, 30, 31. Attack, 28, 31. Defense, 27, 31. SP ATK, 27, 31. SP Def, 26, 31. Speed, 30, 31. Overall 4 rating, Purple, total 4, 165. If his guess was correct, the man before him was like the one he had encountered before. Both belonged to an organization skilled in cloning Pokemon. Their true purpose this time was clearly to obtain fresh cloning material from Zapdos. Sato didn't fully understand cloning technology, but he knew how crucial the source material was. If clones were made from a single specimen, even if successful, they would inevitably have flaws. After all, even among the same species, genetic chains vary greatly. Perfect replication is extremely difficult. However, if one could gather genetic data from multiple individuals of the same species and extract common traits, it might be possible to create an entirely new being, not just an imperfect copy. For example, Mewtwo. Its birth was a miracle. It didn't only contain Mew's genes, it also incorporated genetic material from other organisms, making it a completely new entity. Give me an obedient Zapdos. That's quite the claim. You know how rare legendary Pokemon are, right? You talk like they grow on trees. I've seen plenty of people try to take something for nothing. Who knows what you'll do after taking Zapdos? I don't trust you. Of course, you can try to take it from me right now. But let me warn you, if you fail to kill me, be prepared for my retaliation. No matter where you run, I'll hunt you down. These were still just Sato's speculations. To confirm them, he decided to continue probing the man's identity. After a brief moment of thought, he spoke in a deliberately disdainful tone. Unfortunately, Sato had miscalculated. He didn't know that this black-robed man, who possessed a legendary Pokemon, had a particularly bad temper. His threatening words only had the opposite effect. Celebi, use Psychic. A cold glint flashed in the man's eyes. Without hesitation, he ordered Celebi to attack. Ever since he had obtained a legendary Pokemon from the organization, he had tasted too many victories. He didn't believe Sato could defeat him, only that he might be troublesome. Now that the prey dared to threaten the hunter, how could he tolerate it? Besides, he was never known for his patience. Nidoking, Shadow Ball. Sato, who had been fully focused on the man, reacted instantly. He pressed the button on his Pokeball and released Nidoking, now at level 59, commanding it to counterattack. In the next moment, Celebi unleashed a powerful psychic wave. An invisible force surged forward at high speed toward Sato. But just as the attack was about to strike, a flash of white light appeared, Nidoking's massive body stepped in front of him. At the same time, a sphere of terrifying ghost-type energy shot out from Nidoking's mouth. In an instant, Shadow Ball collided with the psychic force created by Psychic. Ghost-type energy naturally suppressed psychic power. Combined with the amplification from Nidoking's sheer force ability and its life orb, the Shadow Ball was far stronger than Celebi's attack. Thus, in less than a second, the psychic wave was completely shattered. The shadow ball continued forward at high speed toward Shalebi. Unfortunately, that brief clash was enough time for Shalebi to react. With a single flap of its small wings, it easily dodged the incoming attack. Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit, huh? Fine, let me show you what real terror looks like. Dark Ray, use Dark Void. The black-robed man showed no sign of panic when Shalebi's attack was broken. Instead, he became even more arrogant. He quickly threw out the poke ball in his right hand and gave the command. In the next instant, a dark ray radiating a sinister aura appeared before Sato. The moment it emerged, waves of nightmare-infused black energy spread from its body and surged toward Nidoking. At the same time, Shalebi continued its assault. A dazzling green light burst from its body, and the surrounding grass on the ground grew wildly, writhing like snakes. Under its control, the overgrown grass rapidly wrapped around Sato and Nidoking's feet, restricting their movement. Chapter 850, Chapter 849, Overconfidence. Kadabra, Magic Coat. Seeing the incoming dark void from Darkrai and that Nidoking was temporarily unable to break free from the vines binding his feet, Sato immediately threw out another Pokeball and issued a command to Kadabra as it emerged. At the same time, a blue glow flashed in his eyes. Through telepathy, he gave an attack order to Kecleon, who had been quietly restrained by vines all this time. The moment Kadabra appeared, it used teleport to arrive in front of Nidoking. A powerful psychic wave erupted from its body, and a mirror shimmering with strange light instantly formed before it. In the next second, when Darkray's dark void struck the mirror, it was reflected back, at an even faster speed, toward its caster. Facing its own rebounded attack, Darkrai showed no panic. Its body suddenly turned into a shadow, gliding rapidly across the ground toward Nidoking. However, the moment Darkrai moved, a streak of fire shot out from the ground beside the black-robed man, targeting Shalebi, who was hovering in the air controlling the plants. Sensing the terrifying heat from the flames, Shalebi, being a grass-type Pokemon, felt a surge of fear. It immediately cancelled its control over the vines and dodged. At this critical moment, under Sato's command, Kecleon seized the opportunity. Not only did it free itself using Flamethrower, but it also launched an attack at Shalebi, successfully forcing it to retreat and relieving the pressure on Nidoking. With Shalebi's control gone, the vines binding Nidoking and Sato instantly weakened. Nidoking, with its immense strength, broke free. Then, under Sato's command, Nidoking unleashed a pillar of fire from its mouth, igniting the grassland ahead. In an instant, a large area in front of Nidoking was set ablaze. The blazing flames cut off Darkray's approach. Seeing that Sato's Pokemon had not only blocked the combined assault of Darkrai and Shalebi but had even gained the upper hand, the black-robed man's expression turned extremely grim beneath his mask. Humph, you do have some skill. But do you think this is all I've got? Moltres, Heatran, come out. Recalling Sato's earlier words, the killing intent in his heart intensified. No longer holding back, he threw out 2 more Pokeballs, releasing his final 2 legendary Pokemon. A level 66 Darkrai, level 62 Moltres, and level 63 Heatran. So he really is from the clone organization. What a luxurious lineup. Seeing so many legendary Pokemon appear at once, Sato finally confirmed the man's identity. At the same time, he felt a sense of urgency about his current situation. Yet instead of fear, he felt a surge of excitement. In the next instant, as all 4 legendary Pokemon launched their attacks simultaneously, Sato placed a hand on Nidoking and used Teleport to leave the spot. When they reappeared, they were already across the river. As for Kadabra, it had already teleported away earlier under Sato's command, while Kecleon once again vanished into invisibility. Trying to run? Not a chance. Shalebi, Darkrai, Moltres, go kill them. Natu, use Teleport to take me and Heatran across. Thinking Sato was trying to escape, the black-robed man grew anxious and immediately ordered his Pokemon to pursue. Shalebi, Darkrai, and Moltres quickly crossed the river, while the shiny Natu on the man's shoulder used Teleport to bring both him and Heatran to the other side. But by then, Sato had already released Crobat, Roserade, Tentacruel, and Whirlipede. Under Roserade's rain dance, dark clouds gathered overhead. By the time the black-robed man arrived, a steady rain had already begun to fall. Trying to weaken Moltres and Heatran with rain? Don't think I'll let you succeed. Moltres, Heatran, use Sunny Day together. Seeing the rain, the black-robed man immediately understood Sato's intention and gave his command. The 2 fire-type legendary Pokemon erupted with blazing flames, working together to disperse the rain clouds with Sunny Day. Naive. Nidoking, use Earth Power on Heatran. Roserade, use Weather Ball on Moltres. Sato naturally wouldn't allow his opponent to change the advantageous weather. He immediately ordered his 2 strongest Pokemon to attack. Don't even think about it. Darkrai, Dark Void. Shalebi, Psychic. Similarly, the black-robed man ordered his remaining Pokemon to intercept. But at this moment, the advantage in numbers became evident. Combined with Sato's telepathic command ability, far superior to his opponents, Darkrai and Shelebi's attacks were quickly neutralized. Darkray's Dark Void was instantly shut down by Crobat's taunt, preventing its use. Shelebi's Psychic aimed at Roserade was successfully launched, but Whirlipede arrived in time and blocked it with Protect, while Tentacruel seized the opportunity to strike it with Venoshock. The next moment, Nidoking's attack erupted. A massive earthen beam burst beneath Heatran, launching it into the air. With a 4x type advantage, combined with the boost from Nidoking's sheer force ability and its damaged life orb, the power of Earth power skyrocketed. The cloned legendary Pokémon was instantly blasted into a near-fainting state. Meanwhile, Roserade's Weather Ball, empowered by the rain, transformed into a water-type move with greatly increased power. Though Moltres wasn't knocked out, its sunny day was interrupted, and it suffered heavy damage. How can his Nidoking be this strong? It's just an ordinary Pokémon, and its level is clearly lower than my Heatran's. Even with a 4x advantage, it shouldn't have been one shot. How is this possible? Seeing Heatran nearly defeated in a single hit, the black-robed man's face filled with shock beneath his mask. At this point, he finally realized. He had been overconfident. He shouldn't have wasted time talking earlier. He should have immediately sent out Darkrai and used Taunt on Sato before Kadabra could appear, sealing Sato's ability to use Teleport. Moreover, Sato's strength far exceeded his expectations. He had assumed that possessing 4 legendary Pokémon guaranteed victory, but after this exchange, it was clear that Sato's team was far stronger than he had imagined. In truth, the clone organization's intelligence network was extremely capable. The black-robed men already knew from their intel that Sato possessed a Kadabra capable of using Magic Coat. Unfortunately, he had grown arrogant. And in doing so, he missed his best chance to defeat Sato. Chapter 851, Chapter 850, An Enormous Fist. Darkrai, use Thunderbolt on Crobat. Shelebi, use Psychic on Nidoking. Moltres, use Air Slash on Roserade. Although the defeat of Heatran made the man in black realize his own arrogance, he still didn't believe he would lose to Sato. He immediately commanded the remaining 3 legendary Pokémon clones to attack. It had to be said, the completion level of these legendary clones was quite high. Their aptitude had all reached the purple tier. Especially Darkrai and Shelebi, these two had even inherited some of the original's innate abilities. For example, Shelebi could communicate with plants. The man in black had relied on this ability to locate Sato in the vast wilderness. In battle, Shelebi could also manipulate surrounding vegetation to fight. Upon receiving the command, Shelebi and Moltres launched their attacks at once. Shelebi attempted to directly use powerful telekinesis on Nidoking. But Nidoking refused to back down, immediately firing back with Ice Beam. In the end, Shelebi successfully struck Nidoking hard with Psychic, but it was also severely injured by Nidoking's Ice Beam. Worse still, because its body had been soaked by rain, it was unfortunately frozen. As for Moltres, although it had already been heavily injured earlier, its legendary physique still allowed it to fight, at least for a final desperate counterattack before collapsing. Its dimmed flaming wings suddenly flared as it beat them fiercely, releasing countless white air blades that blanketed a large area around Roserade, completely sealing off her space for short-range evasion. Fortunately, Roserade was not fighting alone. Under Sato's command, Scolipede, who had already stacked 3 rounds of speed boosts through its speed boost ability, acted like a high-speed vehicle. In the blink of an eye, it carried Roserade out of Moltres' air slash range. At the same time, Roserade didn't remain idle. She immediately counterattacked with Weather Ball. Unfortunately, Moltres no longer needed to follow the men in black's earlier command to use Sunny Day. With its aerial advantage, it easily dodged Roserade's attack. Meanwhile, Darkray's assault was already underway. Among all the legendary clones in the man's possession, this Darkrai was the strongest. However, its strength didn't come from its replication quality, it came from its independent consciousness. Unlike the other 3 clones, Darkrai acted extremely proactively. Even without commands, it could make its own judgments and attack accordingly. As soon as it received the order, a bolt of lightning infused with sinister energy shot from its body toward Crobat. The lightning was far too fast. Even with Crobat's speed, it couldn't outrun it. Left with no choice, it used Protect to block the attack. At that moment, Darkrai transformed into a streak of shadow, instantly slipping past Crobat's interference. At the same time, the dark glow on its body, caused earlier by Crobat's taunt, began to rapidly fade. In an instant, Darkrai appeared beside the relatively weakest Pokémon on the field, Tentacruel. Immediately, numerous double-team clones split off from its body, surrounding Tentacruel from all sides. Tentacruel reacted quickly. The moment it sensed Darkray's approach, it lashed out with its tentacles, using Poison Jab. However, Darkray's sudden use of Double Team caused all of its attacks to miss. Then, from behind Tentacruel, one of the Darkrai clones extended its arm. A small black sphere instantly formed and was released. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. By the time Sato tried to react, it was already too late. Tentacruel was struck by Darkray's dark void. Its entire body turned gray, and it fell into a nightmare state. Darkray's attack flowed seamlessly. The moment Tentacruel entered the nightmare, it followed up with Dream Eater. A phantom Darkray surged forward and collided with Tentacruel. Upon impact, Tentacruel's eyes shrank into needle-like points before it collapsed to the ground, completely losing its ability to fight. After defeating Tentacruel and absorbing its nightmare, Darkray seemed as if it had taken a stimulant. Its single crimson eye flared with intense light, and its aura surged dramatically. At the same time, vast amounts of nightmare energy, like thick black mist, poured out from its body, enveloping the surrounding space and concealing it within. Yet every living being present could feel an overwhelming evil presence emanating from the fog. It was like a dark abyss, pressing down on their hearts and filling them with suffocating dread. As expected, this Darkray is the most troublesome one. The other clones all have dull eyes, but this one is filled with malice. It clearly has strong independent consciousness. Seeing Darkray suddenly become so terrifying after defeating Tentacruel, Sato's heart grew heavy. He had encountered a real Darkray before and was somewhat familiar with its methods. Without a doubt, this berserk-like state was a special application of nightmare energy. Ha ha ha. Kid, you're dead. Darkray has consumed a nightmare, now even I can barely control it. Oh, and let me tell you, its strength is at least 50% higher than usual right now. Go, Darkray, kill them. The man in black revealed a flicker of fear at first, but it was quickly replaced by wild excitement as he laughed arrogantly. The moment he finished speaking, a red glint flashed within the black mist. In an instant, a shadow streaked across the ground behind Sato. Darkray emerged from it, its hand clutching a dark sphere as it lunged toward Sato's head. The moment Darkray appeared behind him, every hair on Sato's body stood on end. A powerful sense of danger surged within him. If Sato had been an ordinary person, he would have been doomed. But he wasn't. He had faced even god-tier Pokemon before, how could he fear a mere clone? You brought this on yourself. I'm not even afraid of the real Darkray, why would I fear a copy like you? Just as Darkray thought it had succeeded, its hand grasped nothing but air. At the same time, Sato's voice, filled with disdain, echoed in its mind. At some point, Sato had already appeared behind it, holding an open Pokeball in his hand. Darkray possessed independent consciousness. It was fully aware that it was merely a clone, but it had not lost control because of it. That didn't mean it didn't care. On the contrary, it hated its identity. It longed to grow stronger, to one day defeat the real Darkray and prove its own existence. Now, Sato's words tore open that deeply buried wound. Fury exploded within it. Darkray immediately sensed Sato's position and turned, preparing to drag him into an endless nightmare. But the moment it turned, a terrifying aura erupted from its left side. For an instant, Darkray felt as though it were facing a prehistoric beast, while it itself was nothing more than a trembling lamb. The next second, its entire body was blasted away by an overwhelming force. And the last thing it saw was an enormous fist. Chapter 852, Chapter 851, An Unexpected Time Projection. How is this possible? The man in the black robe felt his vision blur. In the next moment, the overwhelmingly powerful Darkray in his eyes was sent flying who knows where by a single punch from an ordinary Pokemon that Sato had just released. His legs went weak, and he spoke with a face full of fear. Yes, there was only one Pokemon in Sato's possession capable of instantly blasting away a Berserk level 66 Darkray clone with a single punch. Swampert, whose strength was already extremely close to Elite 4 level. When Sato realized he might become the target of multiple major factions, he had decisively retrieved Swampert from Professor Oak, where it had been staying. In exchange, he returned the much weaker Swampert that belonged to the Tyler identity. The reason Sato showed no fear even after confirming the black-robed man's identity was precisely because of his strongest ace, Swampert. He was confident that unless he faced a true high-level legendary Pokemon, his Swampert could defeat anything. In fact, during the battle, Sato originally thought he wouldn't even need to use Swampert. In his eyes, the black-robed man's command ability was mediocre. His arrogance stemmed only from the fact that these legendary Pokemon clones were stronger than ordinary Pokemon, nothing more. However, Darkray's sudden outburst had caught him off guard. Faced with that life-and-death moment, he had no choice but to bring out Swampert to break the situation. There's nothing impossible about this. Legendary Pokemon are indeed powerful, but they are not invincible. Raising weak Pokemon into strong ones, even surpassing legendary Pokemon, isn't that the very purpose every trainer starts with? Did you really think having a legendary Pokemon would make you unbeatable? How laughable. Seeing the black-robed man trembling in fear, Sato sneered with undisguised contempt. Shut up. You think you've won? Shalebi, show your true power. Summon your time projection and fight. Hearing Sato's words, the black-robed man realized his loss of composure. His face flushed beneath the mask as he shouted in anger and desperation. Summon a time projection. Could this Shalebi clone actually wield the power to traverse the river of time? No, can't let him succeed. Swampert, Nidoking, use Ice Beam together. Sato's expression changed instantly, alarm bells ringing in his mind. He immediately issued commands through telepathy. He understood Shalebi quite well. These Pokemon truly possessed the ability to travel through time. With such an incredible power, it wasn't impossible for them to summon projections from the past, or the future, to fight. That projection could be a past or future version of itself, or someone connected to it. Either way, anything summoned would undoubtedly be recognized by Shalebi, and therefore powerful. But since this Shalebi was a clone, it likely hadn't existed for long. That meant the projection it summoned would most likely come from the future. And projections from the future were almost always terrifyingly strong. The moment the black-robed man finished speaking, Shalebi began to glow brilliantly. A faint power of time emanated from its body, and a distorted, multicolored vortex began to form in the space behind it. At the same time, Swampert and Nidoking unleashed their ice beams, striking Shalebi one after the other. Yet an astonishing scene unfolded. Both beams passed straight through Shalebi's body, disappearing into nowhere. Shalebi remained completely unharmed. Sato's face darkened. Watching the vortex grow larger, he refused to give up and ordered his other Pokemon to continue attacking. But every attack was useless. All of them passed through Shalebi as if it didn't exist. Ha ha ha. It's useless. Shalebi is protected by the power of time right now. Unless it's Dialga, the Lord of Time, or Arceus itself, no one can harm it at this moment. Seeing that Sato's Pokemon couldn't touch Shalebi at all, the black-robed man burst into triumphant laughter. In truth, even he hadn't expected this to succeed. He had only learned about this ability from an Elite Four level member of his organization who also possessed a Shalebi clone. That person's Shalebi clone had reached over 80% completion, far superior to his own, which was only around 70%. This time, he had simply tried it out of desperation, treating a dead horse as if it were alive. And somehow, it worked. Sato said nothing. He immediately gave up attacking Shalebi and instead concentrated all his Pokemon's power on Moltres. Moltres was already heavily injured. Now, under the assault of Swampert, whose level exceeded it by 5, it quickly followed the fate of Heatran and Darkrai, collapsing to the ground and losing its ability to fight. At the same time Moltres fell, Shalebi's summoning process was finally complete. The multicolored vortex expanded to its limit, then burst with brilliant light. From within it, a Shalebi radiating immense power slowly emerged. There was no doubt, this Shalebi came from the future. Its strength had already reached Elite Four level. As soon as it fully emerged, the original Shalebi maintaining the vortex appeared to have exhausted all its strength and collapsed unconscious onto the ground. Ha ha ha. You're finished, kid. Shalebi, kill them all. Sensing the overwhelming pressure of an Elite Four level Pokemon, the black-robed man's face lit up with ecstasy. He immediately issued the command to eliminate Sato and all his Pokemon. But in the very next second, his triumphant expression froze. The newly arrived Shalebi slowly opened its eyes. At first, they were filled with confusion, but the moment it saw Sato, they lit up with joy. Ignoring the black-robed man completely, it instantly flew to Sato, rubbing its small face affectionately against his cheek like an excited child. Only afterward did it seem to notice the black-robed man behind it. It turned its head, and its expression instantly became one of deep disgust. Then, before Sato's astonished gaze and the black-robed man's horrified expression, Shalebi used Psychic to bind the black-robed man and the shiny Nadu on his shoulder. Immediately afterward, it manipulated the surrounding vegetation, causing grass and roots to grow wildly and wrap tightly around them, completely restraining both. Chapter 853, Chapter 852, The Legendary Beast Society. To be honest, Sato was a bit stunned right now. How had the big boss the opponent painstakingly summoned suddenly become so close to him? And from the looks of it, that boss had outright switched sides. A time projection from the future, could it be that in the future, I'll actually form a partnership with this Shalebi? Although Sato was momentarily confused, after thinking it through, he quickly realized that his future self must share an extraordinary relationship with this future projection of Shalebi. Unfortunately, the Shalebi clone that summoned the projection had too weak a grasp of temporal power. Before Sato could even communicate with the projection via telepathy, its body began to fade rapidly. Farewell, my friend. We'll meet again in the future. At that moment, this sentence suddenly echoed in Sato's mind, and the Shalebi projection vanished completely. At the same time, the black-robed man and the shiny Natu, who had been bound by grass and roots created by Shalebi, broke free and immediately turned to flee. The black-robed man was truly afraid now. He wasn't a fool. If even Shalebi's future projection had defected, it meant that the person before him was someone who would not die here, and who would likely become an unimaginable powerhouse in the future. Right now, all he wanted was to escape as far as possible and hide somewhere Sato could never find him. But how could Sato allow that? The moment the black-robed men broke free, Sato immediately used telepathy to command Crobat to use taunt and mean look on the shiny Natu. Fortunately, this shiny Natu did not possess the rare magic bounce ability. Otherwise, stopping them would have been far more difficult. Tell me everything you know about your organization. If you do, I can make things easier for you. Sato approached slowly with his Pokemon, his expression icy. He remembered clearly, this man had never taken him seriously and had fought with full killing intent. Against such an enemy, Sato would show no mercy. You've already won, what more do you want? I swear, if you let me go, I'll never appear before you again. Killing me is useless anyway, I'm just an insignificant pawn in the organization. Our organization is filled with powerful experts. If you kill me, you'll completely offend us. Then the ones coming after you won't be weaklings like me. Listen, if you let me go and give me some fresh blood from Zapdos, I can guarantee the organization will stop targeting your Zapdos. Even now, the black-robed man refused to face reality. He tried to threaten Sato with his organization, putting on a fierce front while inwardly panicking. Still refusing to accept reality, huh? No matter. Even if you don't want to talk, I have ways to make you speak. Sato's gaze turned cold as he spoke. In the next instant, a blue glow flashed in his eyes. The black-robed man, who was staring at him, suddenly had his eyes dim, but his body trembled violently, veins bulging beneath his mask. Sato was using hypnosis. However, he hadn't expected the man's willpower to be so strong. The man fiercely resisted the mental intrusion, causing a brief stalemate. Seeing this, the shiny Natu's eyes flickered with cunning. Suddenly, it leapt forward, attempting to attack Sato at close range, hoping to interrupt the hypnosis and take Sato hostage. But its plan was naive. The moment it jumped, its body froze midair. A dark tongue wrapped tightly around it. Then, a massive hand grabbed it entirely, and with a slight squeeze, the shiny Natu lost consciousness. Kadabra, Swampert, and the Kecleon quietly perched on Sato's shoulder had been protecting him the entire time. The shiny Natu had no chance of succeeding. Though the black-robed man's willpower was stronger than most, he was still just an ordinary human with no special abilities. Under Sato's relentless mental assault, he finally succumbed after 1 or 2 minutes and fell into a hypnotized state. Now reduced to an unconscious puppet, he answered everything Sato asked. Soon, Sato obtained a large amount of information about the so-called cloning organization. It turned out that the organization's true name was the Legendary Beast Society. It was a powerful group hidden deep in the shadows, with influence spanning the entire world. Their goal was to collect legendary Pokemon and create artificial versions that would be completely obedient to humans. As for the identity of the organization's leader, someone at the black-robed man's level had no knowledge of it. The only person he knew was his direct superior, an executive hidden within the Hoenn League, known only by the codename Mr. K. This mission to see Sato's Zapdos had been assigned by Mr. K. According to the black-robed men, Mr. K's original intention wasn't to take Zapdos by force. At first, he only wanted to trade for some fresh blood from Zapdos in exchange for generous compensation. The plan to steal Zapdos was merely a backup option if the negotiation failed. Of course, compared to a small sample of blood, obtaining an entire legendary Pokemon would greatly increase the mission's value, and the rewards. In the end, the black-robed man had overestimated his own strength and grown greedy. With 4 powerful legendary clones at his disposal, he thought he could easily defeat Sato. He never expected to end up like this. He really brought this on himself, but it's understandable. Anyone who suddenly gains that many powerful legendary clones would have their ego inflated. I bet he didn't take anyone seriously except Elite Four trainers. After extracting all the information, Sato couldn't help but feel both disdain and anger at the man's arrogance. If the man had honestly proposed trading for some Zapdos blood from the beginning, and the price was reasonable, Sato would likely have agreed, out of respect for the Legendary Beast Society. But things had already reached this point. There was no way Sato would let him go. And as for giving up the captured legendary clones, that was even more impossible. Moreover, judging from the earlier interaction with the future Shalebi projection, the Shalebi clone lying on the ground now had a deep connection with him. No matter what, he would not return it. When the boat reaches the bridge, it will naturally straighten. Thinking too much is pointless. If I'm going to fear powerful forces at every step, then what's the point of becoming strong? I might as well go back to Pewter City and live as a carefree rich man. If I'm going to live, I'll live boldly. After staring at the unconscious black-robed men for a moment, Sato's expression hardened with resolve. He had made his decision, there would be no releasing this enemy. Nidoking, Kecleon, use flamethrower to burn away all traces here. After taking all valuable items from the black-robed men and collecting his Pokemon, Sato issued his command. Soon, blazing flames engulfed the area, erasing all traces and sense of the battle. Chapter 854, Chapter 853, Handling the Legendary Pokemon Clones. The conditions of the 3 legendary Pokemon clones, Celebi, Moltres, and Heatran, were not good. For some reason, whether due to genetic instability or inherent defects, their bodies had begun to age rapidly after sustaining heavy injuries. Since the battle ended, aside from Celebi, the grass-type legendary clone, the other 2 had already begun showing severe signs of aging. Sato tried having Roserade use grassy terrain to heal them. While their injuries did recover, the rate of aging did not slow down in the slightest. It was clear that this accelerated aging was irreversible. Sigh, they really are imperfect clones. These legendary clones are basically disposable products, quick to create, decent in combat, but with a limited lifespan. Once they suffer heavy damage or intense battles, their usable time shortens even further. After examining the 3 clones, Sato noticed their aging had clearly accelerated. After thinking it through, he couldn't help but feel a bit regretful. Earlier, he had already learned more about these clones from the men in the black robe. That men had obtained a total of 16 legendary clones from the so-called Legendary Beast Society. So far, aside from the 4 currently present, the other 12 had all either been reclaimed by the organization or died quickly due to rapid aging. As for those reclaimed, he had never seen them again. Additionally, Sato learned that these legendary clones only obeyed the black-robed men. No matter what others said to them, they would not respond at all. From this, Sato inferred that the organization must have tampered with them during their creation. Most likely, some kind of special device had been implanted in their bodies, allowing them to respond only to specific individuals. Sato didn't dwell further on their aging or control issues. Instead, he began thinking about the final missing legendary clone. Yes, he still hadn't found Darkrai, the clone that had been knocked away by Swampert with a single punch. He had searched the area where Darkrai was blasted away for quite some time, but found nothing, only unconscious wild Pokemon scattered around. From this, Sato could already guess what had happened. Clearly, that Darkrai clone hadn't completely lost its fighting ability. Unlike Celebi and the others, it possessed independent awareness. It knew it couldn't defeat Swampert, and it also knew the black-robed man stood no chance against Sato. Returning would only result in being crushed. So it had chosen to flee, without even sparing a glance back at its master. Its method of recovery was also brutal and efficient, it preyed on nearby wild Pokemon. With a combination of Dark Void and Dream Eater, it quickly healed itself and then escaped the area. Sato didn't think much of Darkrai's escape. Now that he understood the flaws of these clones, he had little interest in them. He estimated that before long, Darkrai would rapidly age and perish on its own. He wouldn't even need to act, the problem would resolve itself. I can ignore Darkrai, Moltres, and Heatran, but Celebi is different. There must be some kind of connection between me and this clone, and a close one at that. After giving up the search, Sato began seriously considering how to deal with the 3 clones in his possession, especially Celebi. His brows furrowed deeply. In truth, Sato already had a rough idea of how to solve the clones' defects, but he wasn't confident it would work. The core issue was simple, their genes were incomplete and unstable. So how could this be fixed? In Sato's view, the only true solution was to optimize and complete their genetic structure. Unfortunately, with the current level of science in the Pokemon world, humanity simply couldn't achieve this. Otherwise, even an organization like the Legendary Beast Society, dedicated to cloning legendary Pokemon, wouldn't be limited to producing flawed copies. Perhaps it might be possible in the future, but not now. That path was closed. However, Sato did have one potential solution, the Mew Gene Enhancement Serum in his possession. Mew Gene Enhancement Serum, Mew contains the genes of all Pokemon. This is a special serum cultivated from Mew's genetic cells. When consumed, it can repair and perfect a Pokemon's genetic chain, improving its 4 ratings. On paper, this serum seemed like a perfect solution to the clone's genetic defects. But in practice, Sato had no idea how effective it would be. After all, legendary clones and naturally born Pokemon were fundamentally different. The severity of their genetic flaws was on completely different levels, the clone's defects were far more serious. Whether the serum would work at all was unknown. It might even become a bottomless pit of investment. If he poured resources into it without results, the loss would be catastrophic. Forget it, no need to rush this decision. The priority right now is fixing Celebi's internal issue. If I can't restore its self-awareness, then no matter how much of the Mew serum I use, it'll be pointless, just helping the Legendary Beast Society for nothing. Sato quickly set aside the dilemma of whether to use the serum. Instead, he focused on how to restore the self-awareness of Celebi and the other clones. This was not his area of expertise. Sato was skilled at training Pokemon, but when it came to scientific research, especially genetic cloning, he was completely out of his depth. He needed an expert. After running through possible candidates in his mind, Sato quickly identified a highly suitable person. Maybe I'll end up being the key figure behind the success of the Mutwo creation project. Looking at the 3 Pokeballs containing the legendary clones in his hand, Sato fell into deep thought. Chapter 855, Chapter 854, A Suitable Recipient. In Sato's understanding, if there was anyone with exceptionally deep expertise in genetic cloning technology, it would undoubtedly be Blaine. The former Kanto Fire-type elite had now become the chief scientist of Team Rocket. With the vast funding and manpower provided by Team Rocket, this once respected scientist, who had succumbed to temptation, had already begun the genetic cloning experiments he was most passionate about, and had achieved considerable progress. If Sato's guess was correct, Team Rocket had already obtained Mew's eyelash fossil from a mysterious island and extracted its genetic material. After acquiring Mew's genes, Blaine's research must have advanced by leaps and bounds. In the future, the artificial legendary Pokemon Mutwo would be Blaine's masterpiece. Of course, Mutwo's creation was not his achievement alone. Dr. Fuji, formerly of the League, had also made significant contributions. Now the problem was, how could Sato safely hand over the 3 legendary Pokemon clones, including Celebi, to Blaine, while still ensuring he could retrieve them afterward? After calming down and thinking it through carefully, Sato soon figured out what he should do. Handing them directly to Blaine. Impossible. Although Blaine now worked for Team Rocket, he still maintained his public identity within the League. Both the League and Team Rocket would back him. If someone of unknown origin like Sato handed over 3 legendary clones, Blaine would gladly accept them, but returning them later. That would never happen. Blaine had the strongest backing in the world and was himself a veteran elite-level trainer. He wouldn't fear Sato's retaliation in the slightest. In fact, if Blaine didn't use the League or Team Rocket to come after him instead, Sato should already consider himself lucky. What about handing them over through Giovanni? Sato had considered that as well, but quickly rejected it. While that method was better, at least he would receive some reward, it still fell far short of his ultimate goal. Once the clones were handed over to Giovanni, there would be no way to get them back. Such precious experimental material would never be relinquished by Blaine. Moreover, Sato knew clearly that his standing in Giovanni's eyes was far below Blaine's. At most, Giovanni might compensate him with greater rewards. There was also a fatal flaw in that plan: the existence of Zapdos could be exposed. In that case, not only would he lose the 3 legendary clones, he might even risk losing Zapdos as well. Thus, no matter what, Sato could not deliver the clones to Blaine through that route. In the end, after much deliberation, Sato could only rely on the resourceful and influential Professor Oak once again. There were several reasons for choosing him. First, Professor Oak already knew about Zapdos. Even if Sato told him about the Divine Beast Society, he wouldn't have to worry about Zapdos being confiscated. In fact, through Oak, he could report this dangerous organization to the League's higher-ups. Once the League began investigating, the organization would be thrown into chaos. After all, the League was still the world's #1 superpower. No matter how many cloned legendary Pokemon the organization possessed, they wouldn't be able to stand against it. This would also give the organization no time to deal with Sato, who, in their eyes, was still just an insignificant insect. A perfect 2 birds with 1 stone solution. Second, as a former Kanto champion, Professor Oak must have known Blaine, the retired Fire-type elite. Now that both were Pokemon professors in Kanto, they likely had a strong personal relationship. If Sato handed the clones to Oak and explained their internal issues, Oak would very likely entrust them to Blaine, who specialized in genetic cloning. Even if Oak chose not to give them to Blaine, his vast network would ensure they were handed to a trustworthy and capable Pokemon professor. And most importantly, no one would dare to withhold something entrusted by Professor Oak. At worst, they might delay, but eventually, they would have to return it. Knowing Professor Oak really is a blessing. With someone like him backing you, it's almost impossible for a Pallet Town rookie trainer not to rise. Thinking about all the benefits he had gained since meeting Oak, Sato couldn't help but feel deep gratitude and respect. By now, night had completely fallen, and it was already past 7 p.m. Because of the rapid deterioration of the cloned legendary Pokemon, Sato didn't even have time for a proper meal. He immediately rode Galbat and sped toward Mauville City. Not long after Sato left, a heroic-looking woman dressed in hunting gear appeared at the battlefield, now reduced to scorched ruins. She stayed for a short while. When the person she was waiting for didn't appear, her expression turned grim. She quickly took out a communicator and sent a coded message. More than 10 minutes later, at a Pokemon Center in the western outskirts of Mauville City, Sato once again initiated a remote video call with Professor Oak. "That's everything, Professor. I'll leave these 3 legendary clones in your care. They're all very pitiful Pokemon. If possible, I hope you can help them regain their self-awareness." Sato recounted his battle with the Cloaked Man and the subsequent interrogation in full detail. His tone carried a trace of sorrow. Humph. Those despicable scoundrels. How dare they toy with life like this? Professor Oak, who had been eating instant noodles for dinner, immediately flew into a rage after hearing everything. Don't worry, Sato. Leave it to me. I'll do everything in my power to help them. Just as you said, they are all pitiable lives. Then, after calming down slightly, Oak's expression grew serious. One more thing, the organization behind this, don't act rashly against them. If they can clone legendary Pokemon, they must already possess a considerable number of them. Their foundation is unfathomable. Work hard. With your talent, and Swamperts, you'll become a true Elite Four level trainer within a year. I'm looking forward to your future. When the time comes, I'll need your help as well. The future stability of the world will depend on capable young trainers like you. Sato listened carefully, his expression turning solemn. Don't worry, Professor. I'm not reckless. I'll remember your words. At the same time, in a lavishly decorated office at the top floor of the Mauville City League headquarters, a phone suddenly rang. A large, powerful hand picked up the receiver. A well-dressed, imposing man answered. It's me. A voice came from the other end, firm and unquestionable. The man's expression changed instantly. His tone became extremely respectful. How may I be of service? A few seconds later, the call ended. But now, the face of the man, who held a position high enough to work at the top of the league building, had turned pale, with a trace of fear lingering in his eyes. Chapter 856, Chapter 855, The Difficult Path to Elite Four Advancement. After dealing with the matter of Shalebi's 3 legendary clone Pokemon, Sato continued his conversation with Professor Oak. This time, their discussion shifted toward the topic of Pokemon advancing to the Elite Four level. Professor Oak also realized that Sato might soon face even greater dangers. So instead of urging him to continue slowly building his foundation, he held nothing back and shared everything he knew about the process of a Pokemon advancing to the Elite Four level. Half an hour later, Sato ended the conversation with satisfaction and finally went off to eat, feeling reassured. After finishing the matter concerning Zapdos, Professor Oak could continue appearing in Mauville City under the identity of Shinichi Ryuzaki without much issue. Still, for safety, he kept a low profile, changing into an inconspicuous outfit in a surveillance blind spot inside the Pokemon Center before quietly leaving. Following the principle of convenience, Sato chose a nearby restaurant with a good reputation for dinner. However, with Swampert, the ultimate big eater, now in his team, the cost of the meal was anything but small. They nearly exhausted the restaurant's ingredients prepared for the next day. When Sato left, the restaurant owner was grinning from ear to ear, though there was also a trace of shock in his eyes. After dinner, Sato switched back to his identity as Tyler and began strolling through Mauville City's night market. Originally, according to his plan, he was supposed to challenge Watson the next day. But considering Watson's current dispirited state, doing so would be rather inconsiderate, and it certainly wouldn't result in an exciting Pokemon battle. So Sato decided to continue heading north. He would postpone the Mauville Gym Challenge and instead head to Lavaridge Town to challenge the Lavaridge Gym. From what he knew, the gym leader there was Flannery's grandfather. Flannery's grandfather was no ordinary person, he had once been Hoenn's Fire-type Elite Four member. He only retired due to old age. In terms of generation, he belonged to the same era as Professor Oak, Price, and Blaine. Now, with the emergence of the legendary Beast Society, Sato began to feel that his situation was becoming increasingly precarious. He needed to strengthen himself as quickly as possible. And the fastest way to do that was to push Swampert into the Elite Four level. Swampert had already reached level 67, only 3 levels away from the threshold. But Sato knew that these 3 levels were deceptively difficult. They blocked the vast majority of Pokemon, especially the crucial barrier between level 69 and 70. Sato intended to use Swampert to challenge this retired Fire-type elite, hoping to quickly push it to level 69. While training could increase levels, battling strong opponents was by far the most effective way to grow rapidly. From Professor Oak, Sato learned that for a Pokemon to break through to the Elite Four level, it must meet at least 3 conditions. First, its level must reach 69. Second, its control over its own attribute energy must reach master level. Third, it must complete energy infusion. In fact, the first 2 conditions existed mainly to support the third. Energy infusion was the process of qualitative transformation. In truth, this process began quietly from the moment a Pokemon was born. However, the transformation was extremely slow. Only when a Pokemon's physical condition reached a certain threshold and its mastery over its attribute energy reached master level could this process accelerate. Because of this, most Pokemon weren't unwilling to advance to the Elite Four level, they were simply unable to complete the energy infusion step, leaving them stuck at level 69. According to Professor Oak's research, the first condition primarily applied to ordinary Pokemon. It was well known that each level up improved a Pokemon's physical condition slightly. By level 69, most Pokemon had reached the physical threshold necessary to carry out energy infusion on their own. Of course, there were exceptional Pokemon, like Swampert, with perfect IVs. Each of its level-ups brought far greater improvements than normal Pokemon. As a result, while ordinary Pokemon might only meet the requirements for energy infusion at level 69, Pokemon like Swampert could meet them as early as around level 60. And if such Pokemon had long consumed specialized Pokemon food, they might even meet the requirement as early as their mid-50s. That said, completing energy infusion earlier was not necessarily better. On the contrary, the stronger a Pokemon's physical condition before crossing into the Elite Four level, the easier the breakthrough would be, and the greater the benefits gained. This was why most Pokemon waited until they were on the verge of breaking through before undergoing energy infusion. Completing it too early would weaken the final result and prevent a perfect advancement. If a Pokemon's body were compared to a container, then energy infusion would be like pouring energy into that container. The sturdier the container, the more energy it could hold. And the more energy it absorbed, the greater the benefits it would gain during the tempering process. Sato's Swampert had already met the first two conditions. Thanks to long-term consumption of specialized Pokemon food and the blessing of Kyogre, its physical condition was only slightly below that of true Elite Four level Pokemon. As for its control over water-type energy, it was already approaching the level of an Elite Four Zapdos mastery over electric energy. Therefore, Swampert was now fully ready to begin preparing for energy infusion. However, according to Professor Oak's findings, completing energy infusion was not something that could be done in a day or two. If everything went smoothly, the process might take 2 to 3 months. If not, it could take years, or even a lifetime of being stuck at that stage. This was because the process was extremely painful and dangerous. It was almost impossible for a Pokemon to complete it in one go. After each round of energy infusion, it needed time to adapt to its greatly enhanced body. If anything went wrong during the process, the Pokemon could suffer severe damage. Before attempting energy infusion again, it would need time to recover. The sign that a Pokemon had successfully completed energy infusion was simple. A corresponding attribute energy mark would appear on its body, and it would resonate briefly with the surrounding attribute energy. At that moment, the Pokemon would naturally step into the Elite Four level, becoming a true Elite Four Pokemon standing at the very peak of the pyramid. Chapter 857, Chapter 856, Searching for a Suitable League Mission. Early the next morning, at the Pokemon Center in downtown Mauville City, Sato woke up right on time at 7 a.m. After washing up, having breakfast, and completing his morning training routine, he began preparing to leave Mauville. Before departing, however, he made a special trip to the second floor of the Pokemon Center, hoping to find a suitable mission in the task hall that he could complete along the way. His next destination was Lavaridge Town. Based on the route, he would have to pass through Route 111 and Route 112. But Route 111 was extremely long. If he relied on an off-road bicycle, it would take at least several days to traverse. Moreover, the central section of Route 111 connected to the largest desert in Hoenn, making the journey particularly difficult. This trip to Lavaridge Town was bound to take quite some time. Sato was not someone who liked wasting time. If he could complete some tasks along the way during his journey, he would be more than willing to do so. At present, his Tyler identity had just a little over 5,000 league contribution points left. After accepting his promotion mission, his contribution points had been nearly depleted. If he hadn't helped Watson resolve the blackout crisis in Mauville Midway, his contribution points would have dropped below 4 digits. Although Tyler was still only a peripheral member of the league, his exchange permissions within the league system had increased significantly, only slightly below that of Raiden Suzuki, who held a B-rank bounty hunter status. In short, even rare technical machines like Swords Dance were now within reach for him to exchange under this identity. At the moment, Sato wasn't particularly short on money. Unfortunately, many things couldn't simply be bought with money, such as high-level TMs like Swords Dance, Taunt, and Acupressure. This was where the League's advantage truly showed. With its deep foundation, the League controlled a vast number of rare resources. As long as you had enough contribution points and the right permissions, you could exchange for them. Right now, Sato's primary goal was to strengthen Swampert, but he wouldn't neglect the growth of his other Pokemon either. At present, the TMs he most wanted were Acupressure and Taunt. The former would allow Tentacruel to rapidly boost its own strength, while the latter would give Kadabra the ability to shut down opponents' status moves. As their levels increased, Tentacruel and Kadabra were becoming increasingly important members of Tyler's team. Tentacruel, with its mirrored-type techniques, could almost ignore type disadvantages. Combined with Aqua Ring, Barrier moves, Giga Drain, and its naturally high special defense, its durability had reached astonishing levels. Moreover, as Tentacruel mastered fighting with multiple tentacles simultaneously, its offensive capability had also improved significantly. It had now become a powerful frontliner capable of both tanking and dealing damage. Once Tentacruel mastered Acupressure, its speed weakness would no longer be a limitation, and it would gain the ability to sweep entire teams. As for Kadabra, after learning Magic Bounce and Ally Switch, its strategic value had risen tremendously, both in Sato's Tyler identity and his Raiden Suzuki identity. Magic Bounce was the nemesis of all status moves, even powerful techniques like Taunt were rendered useless before it. With this ability, Kadabra could greatly enhance Sato's survivability, eliminating the threat of moves like Taunt and Mean Look. As for Ally Switch, its power spoke for itself. When used properly, it was a god-tier move. Sato had once used it to trap and kill Hashimura, a future high-ranking executive of Team Magma. Thus, for now, Kadabra's role, despite its still developing psychic strength, was not focused on defeating enemies directly, but on protection and disruption. However, this level of protection and disruption was still not enough. Both Magic Bounce and Ally Switch were reactive moves, they lacked offensive pressure. That was where Taunt came in. This aggressive move would significantly enhance Kadabra's disruptive power. With its ability to use teleport, it could launch sudden attacks that were nearly impossible to evade. Just imagine, an opponent on the battlefield tries to use a defensive move like Protect, only for Kadabra to suddenly appear and hit them with Taunt. The despair would be immediate. Unfortunately, neither Acupressure nor Taunt were moves that could be exchanged with just over 6,000 contribution points. Acupressure required 30,000 points, while Taunt cost a staggering 50,000. For comparison, Sato had only spent 15,000 points to obtain Sword's Dance. This showed just how rare and valuable these two moves were. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that very few Pokémon could learn Acupressure, its cost would likely rival that of Taunt. By the time Sato arrived at the task hall on the second floor of the Pokémon Center, it was already past 9 a.m. At that hour, the place was filled with trainers looking to pick up suitable missions. There was never a shortage of tasks in the hall, especially in a densely populated and highly developed city like Mauville, where countless issues arose every day. With his newly issued League ID, Sato entered the inner hall smoothly, under the envious gazes of the many ordinary trainers still searching for tasks in the outer hall. Unlike the outer hall, which catered to regular trainers, the inner hall was reserved for official League trainers. The missions here were more difficult, more rewarding, and far more diverse. Generally, League missions fell into three categories. Protection missions, escorting or guarding a person for a period of time or to a specific destination. Hunting missions, searching for specific items or dealing with rogue trainers and Pokémon. Training missions, assisting in training Pokémon or helping with specialized training tasks. Compared to the crowded outer hall, the inner hall had very few people. Including Sato, there were only 15 League trainers present. After briefly observing the other 14 and confirming he didn't recognize any of them, Sato turned his attention to the mission board on the walls. Finding a mission that could be completed along his route wasn't easy. After circling the walls once, he finally identified 3 reasonably suitable tasks. The first was essentially a delivery job. The task required delivering a letter to a person somewhere along Route 111. However, the recipient had a peculiar personality and carried no communication device. As a result, the mission provided no exact coordinates, the person had to be located through exploration. Perhaps due to this uncertainty, the reward was quite low, only 1,000 contribution points. The second mission was a hunting-type task. It required capturing 10 different species of ground-type Pokémon from the desert. The client was a junior Pokémon researcher who wanted to study the shared habits of desert-dwelling Pokémon. The reward was 3,000 contribution points. The third mission was the most interesting, and also the most dangerous. It was a protection mission requiring the escort of a ruins exploration team for 2 weeks in the desert. The reward was extremely generous, 20,000 contribution points, along with additional bonuses. And the client behind this mission was none other than the famous explorer, Brandon. Chapter 858, Chapter 857, The Assessment. In Sato's memory, Brandon was a truly powerful trainer who possessed legendary Pokémon, 3 of them, in fact, Regirock, Regice, and Registeel. At the same time, he was also the Pyramid King of the Battle Frontier. However, based on the intelligence Sato had gathered from various news publications and forums, this famous explorer did not yet hold the position of Frontier Brain, nor did he possess any legendary Pokémon. In other words, Brandon was still in the midst of his journey to locate the ruins of the 3 Regis. For now, he was simply a highly renowned explorer. Ruins exploration, just thinking about it makes it interesting. Even if it takes time, there will definitely be gains, and the rewards are generous too. After standing in front of the mission board for a while, Sato decided to accept the task, a faint smile appearing on his face. As for the other 2 missions, Sato also wanted to take them on. After all, every little bit counted. He urgently needed a large amount of League contribution points. If he could complete them along the way, all the better. Unfortunately, when he went to register the mission at the front desk, he was informed that Brandon's commission required a qualification assessment. The requirement was simple: defeat a subordinate stationed in Mauville City to recruit personnel. According to the staff, this mission carried extremely high risk, and only sufficiently strong trainers were qualified to take it. Sato had no objections to this. After all, he didn't want teammates who would drag him down either. Moreover, ruins exploration was inherently dangerous. Without sufficient strength, it was like walking into a predator's jaws. As guards, they would be the ones standing on the very front line of danger. The assessment was to be held at Mauville City's History Museum. However, the examiner had strictly stated that candidates could only meet him after 11 p.m. Close to 11 p.m., Sato arrived at the main hall of the museum in northern Mauville City. By then, more than 20 league trainers who had accepted the same mission had already gathered there. To Sato's surprise, the noble young man named Hughes, whom he had previously encountered at the Slateport Battle Arena, was also present. Hughes clearly hadn't expected Sato to show up either. When Sato entered, a flash of surprise crossed his face, but he quickly concealed it, pretending not to recognize Sato and continuing his lively conversation with a green-haired beauty in front of him. Seeing this, Sato abandoned any intention of greeting him. He simply found a spot to stand and waited patiently for the examiner. At 11:14 p.m., a disheveled middle-aged man with heavy dark circles under his eyes finally appeared before everyone. Ahem, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm the one responsible for assessing whether you are qualified to serve as guards for the ruins expedition. My name is Gubwa, a researcher of ancient texts. The assessment is simple. First, you will complete a written test. Since the excavation site is in the desert, if you lack basic desert survival and archaeological knowledge, I suggest you withdraw now. After passing the written test, you only need to defeat one of my Pokémon to pass. After clearing his throat, Gubwa addressed the gathered trainers, all of whom had turned their attention to him. He then took out a stack of prepared test papers from his storage device and handed them out. To be honest, when Sato saw the test paper, he nearly collapsed internally. His knowledge of desert survival and archaeology was extremely limited. Although he had been to a desert before, it hadn't been for long, and he had relied almost entirely on his Pokémon. Fortunately, Sato wasn't ordinary. Using his psychic link ability, he observed the answers on others' papers through Kecleon's eyes, seeing everything clearly. After carefully selecting, Sato decided to copy, after slight modifications, the answers of Hughes, who had submitted his paper first and had near-perfect answers. With his exceptional memory, a single glance was enough to memorize the entire sheet. A short while later, Gubwa quickly finished grading. As expected, Sato passed the first round with an excellent score. At that point, only 8 trainers remained in the hall. You all answered very well. Good. Next, you only need to defeat one of my Pokémon to join this great ruins expedition. Follow me. Gubwa, clearly fond of those with archaeological knowledge, showed a hint of a smile as he spoke. Soon, he led Sato and the others to the museum's backyard, where an open-air battlefield came into view. Come out, Galark. Without wasting time, Gubwa stepped to one side of the field and released a Galark. Greetings, Mr. Gubwa. My name is Hughes. Allow me to be the first to challenge you. Before Gubwa could call anyone forward, Hughes stepped up voluntarily, bowing politely as he spoke. This won't be easy, a level 55 Galark right from the start. Looks like the minimum requirement for this guard mission is at least Pseudo Elite 4 level. Sato used his system to scan Galark. Upon seeing its level, he frowned slightly. Currently, the highest level Pokémon under his Tyler identity was Kecleon at level 49. Defeating a level 55 Galark with a 6-level gap would not be easy. Of course, if Galark weren't a ground type, Pikachu would have had a much easier time. Hughes himself was a Pseudo Elite 4 trainer, and his team was strong. He used a level 56 Mandibuzz to successfully defeat Galark. However, the battle revealed that Gubwa was far from a helpless scholar, his command skills were quite impressive. If not for Mandibuzz's type advantage and aerial mobility, Galark might have turned the tide several times. About half an hour later, it was Sato's turn. He was the second-to-last participant. This time, Gubwa once again sent out Galark. But what gave Sato a slight headache was that Gubwa showed no intention of holding back. As the assessments progressed, the Pokémon he used grew stronger. This time, the Galark was level 57. Go, Kecleon. Show them your strength. Sato neither hesitated nor relied on stronger Pokémon like Swampert to pass easily. Instead, he directly sent Kecleon, resting on his shoulder, into battle. Chapter 859, Chapter 858, The Deadly Power Line. Sato was quite familiar with Galark. Back on the mysterious island, he had encountered this Pokémon many times in the desert ruins, and had even joined other Team Rocket elites to defeat a gigantic Galark summoned by Unknown. Because of this, Sato understood this Pokémon very well. Its weakness lay in its poor mobility, but its strengths were equally obvious. With a base attack stat of 130, its physical offense was extremely high, and its HP and defenses were also solid, giving it remarkable durability. Another key trait was its transformation ability. It could retract its legs into its body, turning its waist into a propulsion system and switching into a flight mode. In this form, its arms could also retract into its wrists, forming auxiliary thrusters. After scanning the Galak sent out by Gubo with his system ability, Sato immediately knew that Kecleon was facing a tough opponent. This Galak had clearly been specially trained. Because Galak possessed the Iron Fist ability, Gubo had deliberately taught it punching moves such as Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, and Ice Punch. If Kecleon allowed it to get close, the consequences would be severe. Moreover, to compensate for Galak's slow speed, Gubo had equipped it with utility moves like Rock Tomb and Icy Wind, which would reduce the opponent's speed upon landing. The battlefield was a flat, open area with no grass or obstacles. However, due to previous matches, the ground was already riddled with craters and uneven terrain. Galak, use Earthquake, force it out. The battle began quickly. Since Kecleon was invisible, Gubo couldn't immediately locate it. Instead of attacking recklessly, he chose to probe with a wide area move. At level 57, Galak had already mastered the powerful ground-type move Earthquake. Upon receiving the command, it stomped heavily on the ground. Instantly, violent tremors spread across the battlefield. The shockwaves struck everything within range indiscriminately. Yet strangely, although the entire battlefield was affected and cracks spread across the ground, there was still no sign of Kecleon. Sato, meanwhile, remained silent the entire time, issuing no audible commands, as if he had allowed Kecleon to endure the attack without resistance. Even though Kecleon is far from the epicenter and only took residual shockwaves, that earthquake still dealt considerable damage. Did he really choose to endure it just to avoid revealing its position? Hughes, watching from the side, showed a puzzled expression. However, as someone who suspected Sato's identity as a psychic, Hughes believed Sato had already issued commands silently, just in a way others couldn't perceive. If it won't come out, then we'll do it again. Galak, use Earthquake. Gubo kept his eyes fixed on the battlefield. He knew that Kecleon's zigzag red stripe on its belly couldn't turn invisible, yet he still couldn't locate it. His expression darkened as he gave the order again. He was convinced Kecleon was still on the ground, just hiding in a blind spot, so he continued using Earthquake to force it out. Another massive tremor shook the battlefield. But once again, after the shaking subsided, there was still no trace of Kecleon, as if it had vanished entirely. So that's where it is. No wonder it didn't want to reveal itself, it's draining Galak's stamina. Hughes shifted his gaze upward. When he noticed a barely perceptible sway in a wire above the battlefield, realization dawned on him. There was nowhere on the ground for Kecleon to avoid Earthquake. But above the battlefield, there was one thing. A power line suspended in midair. Just as Hughes deduced, Kecleon was currently hanging from that power line with its long tongue, successfully avoiding both earthquake attacks. At the same time, it had used Nasty Plot, raising its special attack by 2 stages. However, after using the move, its invisibility broke. Its body turned completely visible, dark and exposed. At this moment, Gubo and the others finally noticed Kecleon in the air, along with the nearly invisible power line. Their expressions turned awkward. Gubo himself flushed with anger. So you've been found. Kecleon, use Ice Beam. Sato immediately seized the moment, calmly issuing his command. In an instant, Kecleon's body turned icy blue. A thick beam of freezing energy shot from its mouth, streaking toward Galak below. Galak, already slow and still recovering from consecutive earthquakes, had no time to react. The sneak attack landed cleanly. The ice beam dealt heavy damage and coated Galak's body in a thin layer of frost. Galak, switched to flight mode, blasted out of the sky. Gubo, feeling the stares of the crowd, burned with embarrassment and anger. He immediately ordered a counterattack. Galak retracted its legs, shifting into flight mode, and surged upward toward Kecleon. Jump down. Use Double Team and Substitute. Leave the substitute on the ground, your real body goes invisible again. Sato gave rapid instructions via telepathy. Kecleon immediately leapt from the power line. Midair, it used Double Team and Substitute in succession. Multiple Kecleons appeared as it fell. Galak struck, but chose the wrong target. Its dynamic punch smashed a mere illusion. Meanwhile, the real Kecleon and its substitute had already reached the ground. The real one vanished again using its invisibility, leaving only the substitute behind as a decoy. Don't let it escape. Switch back, use Earthquake. Gubo, now thoroughly enraged, seized the moment. Galak reverted to its normal form midair and dropped like a depth charge. Boom. A far stronger earthquake than before erupted across the battlefield. Under Sato's control, the substitute tried to jump to evade, but the sustained shockwaves lasted too long. In the end, it collapsed, unable to withstand the attack. Seeing this, Gubo's anger subsided slightly. He even felt a trace of guilt, thinking perhaps he had been too harsh on such a young opponent. But that feeling lasted only seconds. because the fallen Kecleon suddenly dissolved into particles of light. His pupils shrank. Something was wrong. Before he could react, a massive icy beam descended from above and struck Galark's head directly. The head was Galark's core weakness. The sudden ice beam hit squarely, and instantly decided the battle. Under the stunned gazes of the crowd, Galark collapsed heavily onto the ground, completely unable to continue fighting.